The replay. Pavia throws. Touchdown, Vanderbilt.
This is 365 Sports, powered by SicEm365.com.
Handoff inside. Russell. No, on the outside. Touchdown. Singleton keeps it and scores. Malachi Singleton off the bench has put Arkansas in front from 11 yards.
365 Sports is presented by IdealMRI.com. High-quality MRIs for $497 or less. IdealMRI.com. Your health is important, so is your budget.
Canes threatening to make it a one-possession game. Ward, a lot of room. He's going to run it. Cam Ward, open area. Touchdown, Miami. 24 yards on the run.
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
Moss to the end zone, intercepted. Coy Parrish. And the Gophers beat USC 9 seconds away from doing that for the first time since 1955.
365 Sports is turbocharged by Unite Private Networks. Find out more at uniteprivatenetworks.com.
Le'Veon Moss, and A&M just keeps rolling. Look at big Le'Veon Moss. He's going to house it to open up the second half. The Aggies can do no wrong today.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
And here we go on this Monday after a college football weekend of chaos, and maybe just the start of what we will see more often, although every year there was always one or two Saturdays in college football that didn't even always have to involve bangers. Top 25 teams against top 25 teams, and we have a few of those, of course, coming up this weekend. But what a weekend. The college football landscape is getting closer and closer to the NFL because of NIL. The transfer portal, really, the NFL doesn't have that. You just can't go anywhere for free. But because of the money involved, the separation itself, and yet what makes that league so good is the parity. You never know who might go 8-9 one year and 14-3 the next. David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak. And this is where, is this going to be the exception weekend once or twice a year, or is this where we're headed, where college football has very little separation other than what you hear about ratings and attendance and also revenue?
I think this is where we're headed. Now, some conferences in particular will be able to withstand it more than others, but you're going to see peaks and valleys. It's going to be like professional sports. You're going to have a lot of years where you say, my team was good. What happened this year? Well, when free agency comes to things, it creates chaos, and chaos then leads to more parity. Look, I mean, dynasties happen in the NFL. The Chiefs are in one right now. The Patriots had one, but there was a stretch there where, like, outside of the Patriots, it was kind of other people winning Super Bowls. And you'll see that, I think, in college football a lot more now because you're adding games. You add games into a playoff that's more chances to lose. You add games into a playoff that also gives you opportunities to lose in the early season and it not affect you as much. So I think this is going to be more the norm as things go on.
Yeah, I think it might be the norm. I mean, we'll see. I definitely think there's going to be more parity nowadays than there's not because there's abilities for schools that otherwise wouldn't get big players to have the ability to do that, to go get a Diego Pavia and give Vanderbilt a chance to knock off Alabama, although it took obviously much more than just him. And there's examples all over some of the games this weekend of teams that have benefited from the portal or benefited from NIL and put themselves in a better position to win as a result of that. But I also think, it's not like we were chaos-free previously. There's always a weekend or two every year where there's a lot of chaos. So this is that weekend, and we'll see how many more are out there. But I think it's a sprinkling of both, and I just can't help but be reminded by all the people that wanted to just have no playoff, and especially no expanded playoff. What a genius idea when we enter an era of potential parity to give teams that might be on more equal footing than ever before less opportunity. I understand it messes with the precious. Like, these teams aren't undefeated playing each other because that's how I grew up watching college football, is you have to be immaculate to be. Why? Why? The Super Bowl champ is hardly ever, but like we grew up where you had to be perfect or you had to lose one game. And so everybody's brains are hardwired to think like that's the way it's supposed to be. And shoot, I think this is a way better way if we're going to have parity, have, I don't know, a team that, has 3 losses in the playoff that might beat that team that's undefeated or have 1 loss. And, why you wouldn't want to potentially see that, because you might have to watch a blowout for a couple of hours. Like, I feel like the whole let's not expand the playoff argument's getting blown to smithereens by weekends like this. And in fact, it goes to show you that this is, in my opinion, going to be a better path to determining a champion. Yes, it might include some teams that have more losses than normal, but who cares? Why do we care about that? Why do we worry about that? So yeah, bring on the upsets, bring on the parity, and bring on the madness, and we got a little bit of all that this weekend.
I think that if the more teams that feel like that they don't have to be perfect can have a chance to win if you get hot at the right time, I don't have any problem with the team with 3 losses or whatever it might be getting in. You want who's the best team at the end of the year. And then again, you could also, if you're the College Football Playoff Committee, kind of create that yourself based on what you think of a team who's hot or not. Here are some stats from the weekend of Vanderbilt beating Alabama. And then, of course, there was Arkansas beating what we saw in Tennessee and other games along the way. For the first time in SEC history, 2 AP top 5 teams, Alabama and Tennessee, lost on the same day to unranked teams. 3 top 10 SEC teams lost on the same day for the first time, even earlier than that, since October of 2006. And yet, despite 3 teams in the top 10 losing, Alabama, Tennessee, and Missouri, we will get to the top 25 because still the same number of teams in the SEC are a part of it. In fact, I think they have 1 extra team from the SEC that's a part of the top 25, despite what was that unbelievable year that we have not seen in a long, long time. Top 10 teams losing to unranked teams. In the first 6 weeks of the season, 9 top 10 teams have now lost to unranked opponents. In the first 6 weeks, 9 have now been beaten who were top 10 teams against not a 25 team, unranked teams this year.
It echoes the sentiment I think that we all have about early season rankings being pointless. Mm-hmm. I mean, is FSU a top 10 team? Is Missouri really? I mean, what have you done to be in the top 10 the first month of the season? Like, what has anybody done to be ranked anyway before we've played more than 3 or 4 games? We got
to put some power on those recruiting rankings.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what they're going off of.
Yeah.
NIL rankings based on just a bunch of people like us sitting around and a formula here and there that they created that, nobody knows the details of. But beyond that, that's what we're going off of. And last year's fumes is basically what it is. Those are more unscientific than ever, given that there's the transfer portal, in my opinion. It's not the same team carrying over from year to year. And the case of Oklahoma State, that doesn't even mean anything good necessarily. That might not be a good thing that it's carrying over en masse. So, I think there's a place for preseason rankings for television purposes. Beyond that, I think it's a complete crapshoot that normally has a lot of biases baked into it. And how that continues in the future, I don't know. It's such a big talking point every week. They're never going to go away, but I do think those early ones are more suspect than they've ever been before.
Yeah, Missouri had beaten Vanderbilt, remember, just the week before, so by 3, also beat what was Boston College. I think at the time they were ranked in the top 25, but they got smoked by A&M. Here's some history, and we'll get to that too with the Aggies and Mike Elko. The last Vanderbilt win against Alabama, period, was 1984. That year, Alabama was 5-6. The last Vanderbilt win against Alabama was in Nashville at home, 1969. Alabama was 6-5 that year. Last time Vanderbilt scored 40 points or more against Alabama, you have to go back to 1907, 78-0, when Vanderbilt statistically may have been one of the best teams in the history of the game. AP number 1 teams had gone 134-1 against unranked teams since 2008. Oregon State beat USC. The year before Oregon State, they were unranked, had won 9 games. And Vanderbilt, 0-60 prior to Saturday at home against AP top 5 teams. By the way, not many teams have winning records against the AP top 5, but they were winless at 0-60.
Yeah, it was a remarkable game. I couldn't believe what I was watching the whole time. Like I thought at any moment that, Alabama was going to just quash it, and they never did. They never did. They just Vanderbilt kept coming and coming and coming, and Diego Pavia is just a really fun player to watch. I love him. I loved him at New Mexico. The fact that Vanderbilt was kind of able to sneak him through the portal like they were by hiring his offensive coordinator, and that's where he went. He wanted to go in the SEC. There was only one SEC school that offered him, and he went to Vanderbilt because his offensive coordinator went there. And, I mean, Clark Lee looks like a genius.
Yeah, I mean, he was a really talented player previously. I know a lot of people are probably pretending to know what he was in New Mexico, but I saw him quite a bit combing through the Earl Campbell Award stuff every week, and he was always a player that you stop down on and go like, wait a second, who's this guy? And just saw him more and more and more. And yeah, he's a barrel of entertainment, sometimes for worse, but there's the high hit and high entertainment factor that comes with that young man, and certainly that was on full display during the course of that game, and then even in the post-game interview as well. I wasn't aware of like his Johnny Manziel boyhood dream, watching Manziel beat Alabama and how that played into Saturday's game. I thought that was a great job by the broadcast crew to bring that to the forefront of the entire story, and to see that all come full circle was a really neat moment. And obviously he's gone viral, and he's the talk of Vanderbilt and really of college football this weekend. But a young man who's had a very interesting history, interesting road to get to where he got on Saturday, but has always been a high entertainment type of a player when he's at his best, and that was certainly what the country saw on Saturday. So very cool, and obviously a great job by Vanderbilt to bring him into the fold, because it completely changed what that team otherwise would have been.
All right, so Vanderbilt is going to take things from Saturday night's win, including the goalpost, and they're having an auction. And part of that money will go to pay Alabama $100,000, because if you storm the field, you pay the opponent who was on the field. It doesn't even go to charity or the SEC. Pieces of the goalpost, a Clark Lee autographed game helmet, game balls, the end zone game pylons. Everything must go. Vanderbilt selling a piece of history Saturday night to bring in some cash.
Yeah, might as well. I mean, it's the biggest win in the history of Vanderbilt football, and I mean, who knows when they're going to have something that's going to top this? Like, I mean, given their history, like it could be another 40 years before something tops this. So, because of that, now look, Clark Lee said that when he took the job, he fully expected Vanderbilt to be the best program in the country. And everybody was like, well, that's what you say when you take a job. But they have their first gigantic – I mean, this is gigantic for them. Biggest win in program history, no doubt about it. So you got to run the victory lap while you can, because if you're Vanderbilt, like the other shoe can drop real fast.
Well, it'd be stupid to not do something to fundraise. Yeah. So, I don't think this is any surprise whatsoever. That's what most teams would do, even if it hadn't been a win to begin with. It's the Monday routines. Go ask for money, right? For colleges, basically. So, I appreciate the fact that they're at least giving you something in return, like selling items off, instead of just saying like, hey, now's a great time to donate to the collective. Like, at least they're giving you something for that, other than assurances your money will go to pay Diego Pavia or whatever. But they need to take full advantage of this moment in the spotlight, and maybe it's a longer than a moment in the spotlight for Vanderbilt. That'll remain to be seen, but it was an incredible win. It was unbelievable to watch unfold, and it was an incredible roller coaster ride of emotions to watch them try to handle that all in the second half, especially, and then to actually do it was just amazing. It was completely unforeseen, and especially with Alabama playing pretty good ball up to this point, I don't think anybody, no matter how much you thought Vanderbilt had improved, would have predicted that result on Saturday. So it's funny to see like their makeshift stadium, under construction, as a background to all of that, and to see the crowd have that type of moment that they've never had in most of the history of that entire school was all just very cool, very surreal to still even really be talking about it. But my only question is now, like, who's the dumpster team? Like, you can't say like, oh, Vanderbilt, like, oh, sorry ass Vanderbilt, or they don't belong in the SEC or whatever people have said about them, or how you've dunked on them just by default because, hey, why not? They're Vanderbilt. They've been Vanderbilt for so long. They're that default team that does not belong with all of the big names in the SEC. So now that they've done this, they can't be that team anymore. They get a reprieve from that for at least a good while. So I don't know who that team in college football is now, but it's not Vanderbilt anymore.
No, we used to always say that. It's almost like for the longest time Northwestern, for the longest time back in the day it was Kansas State, for the longest time it was Kansas. Although that's another story for today on our show when we look at the Big 12 on who's more fragile, and obviously some teams are red hot. Here's one of the funniest tweets from that game when it was over. Brett Kelman, Vanderbilt is going to party so hard tonight that an entire generation of future doctors will be slightly dumber.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that was did you guys see any of the videos from Broadway in Nashville?
Oh, my God, yeah.
It was just
one after another.
I mean, it was like the CMAs were in town. Like, that's what it looks like when there's award shows going on at Bridgestone. It was nuts.
Or a bunch of bachelorette parties.
Well, I mean, there were already those going on. That's look, you could take the music out of it for like 6 months. Like if they, like if COVID happened only to musicians, right? It was just a disease that affected pickers and grinners, right? Only that, but they could still do bachelorette parties. Nashville would just be fine.
Absolutely. Craig, do you know who's next on the clock when it comes to who has not beaten the top 10 team the longest stretch or the worst record? Now, Vanderbilt has one.
I have not the slightest clue.
Well, I didn't know. Tulane. 0-39-1. Temple 0-25. Tulsa 0-21. And Cincinnati. I thought that run when they made it to the college football
but
playoff.
When they got their shot, Alabama.
0-18.
Yeah.
So now Vanderbilt is no longer on that list. The next one goes down to Tulane at 0-39-1. And then there's Arkansas. And we're going to have a topic about the Big 12, about which team right now, in your opinion, is the most, I guess you could say, red hot, and also which among a group of teams is most fragile. Josh Heupel at Tennessee has done a really nice job. But they have one fart every year on the road. 2022, they lost at South Carolina. 2023, they made no sense at Florida. And then this past weekend, they lose to Arkansas, a team that was not having a bad record year, but a team and their head coach that needed something good to happen, and they took out the Volunteers.
I think if he gets 2 more wins, because they'd be like that would give him 6. Mm-hmm. If he gets 2 more wins, Sam Pittman's back next year. So if you wanted Sam Pittman gone, you better hope that this is the last one he gets. But most of the time, you don't storm the field and tear down goalposts and then fire a coach.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was absolutely huge for him. I liked some of the moves. They became very Texas-heavy in a good way in the offseason, and I think that's paid some dividends for them. But, Jaquindon Jackson in particular is a guy who I think's had a nice little run there. Andrew Armstrong, the wide receiver. Prior to injury, Taylon Green, obviously a quarterback, even though he's a roller coaster in his own right. But, yeah, I mean, the proof is in the pudding. You're on the hot seat. All you can do is go out there and try to save your job by winning, and he's done that to some extent to lead you to believe that this could be a situation that brings him back ultimately, unlike, maybe some others like Dave Aranda who are struggling to find wins while they are on the hot seat. I think Sam Pittman's making a great case to potentially run it back, if he's able to maintain this kind of core that they've got going in a good direction right now. But, that was a stunning win as well. I mean, I guess – I was just talking about the playoff at the start of the show. If you're somebody who's pissed because Tennessee's lost and they're still probably going to make the playoff, the good news is that if you're, I guess you're on the side of things, this isn't like a season ender. Not that one loss necessarily is, especially for an SEC team, but now you'd be like, oh my God, we can't lose again. Well, now you can't really lose again, but you can, and you should be fine if you take care of the rest of your business. And you know what? While old me would go like, no, you lost. You don't just... If you're one of the best teams in the country, you're going to have to prove it in this playoff. So I don't really have if it means that like Boise State gets a crack at just playing for a national title and like Iowa State gets a crack at playing for a national title, then yeah, give me 2-loss Tennessee in the playoff as well, because they're probably still one of the best teams in the country. And I think to sit there and just erase a season because you lost a game is archaic thinking, and especially with the even playing field like we talked about at the very beginning. So that's a tough loss, but Tennessee's going to be fine. They just got to go out and, win the majority of the rest of their games, and they'll be in the playoff and be able to flex their muscle again. But, yeah, that's a stat that's disconcerting if you're Tennessee fans. It's just this era that doesn't matter as much necessarily.
I think everybody gets a mulligan loss, and especially – depending on what conference you're in. Tennessee, Arkansas, by the way, now with 4 wins, they have 4 of their last 6 games against ranked teams. At least teams that are ranked now, we don't know if they're up or down or where they'll be when they play. Tennessee, meanwhile, on their schedule, because of the fact they just lost to a team like Arkansas or what Alabama did. Alabama's got games coming up at the end, but Tennessee still has to play Alabama. So one of those two is going to have 2. They have Georgia, and they have a game at Vanderbilt at the end of the year with a rivalry game, and who knows, or Kentucky. So it's going to be fun. Hunter Yurachek, the AD at Arkansas, after storming the field alongside Arkansas fans. I love Sam Pittman. He gets a lot of crap, but that guy's a hell of a football coach. He needs to get some credit for tonight's win. Are you happy to pay the fine for the field storming? Hell yeah. From Hunter Yurachek.
I didn't realize this until this morning, that you pay the fine, it goes directly to the team you storm the field on.
Yep.
I just thought it went into like a pot.
I brought that up earlier because I didn't either.
Yeah, I had no idea.
I didn't either.
So Alabama, even when they lose, and every team in the not every team, but they've gotten the field stormed on them 11 years, 11 losses in a row on the road or whatever it is, or 11 teams have done it. And so because of that, now with the new rules, if you storm the field after you beat Alabama, they're getting $250,000. You're just going to give it right to them. So
you're going to pay the team that you stormed the field against.
Well, and look, Tennessee, did it twice last year. They stormed the field twice and didn't care. Vanderbilt, believe me, trying to find $250,000 or $300,000 at Vanderbilt, not hard.
It's a great story because they are the one that a lot of times we insert in the equation of, well, yeah, but they get to play Vanderbilt. Now not. They don't. They are now a team that is no longer just something you could poop on. They still have to go follow up the rest of the year.
At the same time, there's a guy I used to work with. I'm not going to mention his name because I'm not trying to make it like that, but he is the biggest SEC homer, and it used to drive me insane because it was just it was so over the top. It's dude, it's get off your knees, please. Yeah. And I saw this guy turn that Vanderbilt loss they're not in the doghouse anymore, but this just goes to show you week in, week out it's just come on, man. Yeah, it does, I guess, to some extent, but let's not act like Vanderbilt's suddenly world beaters because they won this one game. There's still other teams that are down or whatever. Let's not act like 1 through 16 is suddenly a murderer's row because of Vanderbilt. But could it start to be getting in that direction to where the whole top to bottom is the toughest it's ever been? Yeah, it very well could be. I mean, it could be if Vanderbilt's suddenly playing and winning football games and Arkansas is the other team you thought would be down at the bottom and they're beating Tennessee and, all of a sudden you go, damn, maybe this is more of the 1 through 16 that you used to pretend was the reality, but now is actually more of the reality than it was when you used to say that.
I'll have a note on that, too, because they have now more teams in the top 25 in the AP than they had last week, and they had a bunch of those big boys lose, but they were far enough up the ladder where they weren't going to fall out, but somebody else joined the fray, including – go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when you come to Missouri, Missouri, that's
Fraud.
their first loss, but, they almost lost to Vanderbilt a couple weeks ago.
They might be a top 25 team, but they haven't shown any reason for them to have been 10 or 9.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
A&M had the loss earlier at home to Notre Dame, and you just don't know about them because they can be flaky. But in his first year at A&M, Mike Elko has now started the year 5-1, first time since the COVID year. First 5-game winning streak since 2020. First 3-0 start in the conference since Kevin Sumlin's team in 2016. And the first 28-point victory over a top 15 opponent since a guy named Johnny Manziel was playing for Texas A&M.
Yeah.
That's what's happened. Mike Elko, this doesn't mean A&M's going to run the table, but all of a sudden now they're in that picture where you're like, well, they've been dysfunctional, but maybe they're getting their stuff together.
They got, they didn't maybe get the Texas schedule when it came to the SEC this year, but they certainly did get Florida or Oklahoma's, right? They have a pretty favorable schedule for them down the line to keep in this race for a little bit. If they keep if they keep at this pace, they're going to be just fine, because one of their biggest obstacles on the schedule outside of Texas was Missouri this year, and they just passed that one with flying colors. And never in the Jimbo era did they beat anybody like that decisively. Ever.
No.
Anybody.
No.
They lost to App State, but, like, they didn't even beat – they sometimes didn't beat Sam Houston that decisively. Yeah. Like, they really crushed them.
Yeah, Missouri, I say fraud because I think that they were. I think that was very much like the conference that you played in was giving you a boost in the rankings, because there was no other reason to have them that high. As far if you were going off actual, like, proof in the pudding, that was we think you're pretty good. We have nothing to show for it really, but, like, maybe some of last year we'll just add that into the mix because you haven't done anything all that impressive this year. That is where the rankings are bull, and where they get massaged in a way that – yeah, somehow you get more teams in the top 25, even though, the top teams lost. Well, now they drop a little bit, and the other ones that beat them, well, they go soaring into the rankings now. So I think that's all.
It's a bubble.
It's all really rigged up. It is. But, I think Missouri's still a good team. I just think that they were laughably overrated, and I wasn't surprised to see A&M beat them. I picked A&M to beat them. I didn't think it would be as lopsided as it was, but credit to Mike Elko, and I like the fact that A&M's just gone about their business and winning games, and we're not hearing all that much about it.
By the way,
it's not a bunch of hype. It's not a bunch of, like, this and that and Kevin Sumlin and helicopters and Johnny Manziel throwing dollars, like it was previously. It's just, like, very workmanlike, and it doesn't have to be that way, but I think A&M's experienced the other side of it and had their fun with that, but then that kind of waned, and they had the whole Jimbo situation, and it's kind of time to get back to work and just – be worker bees, and I think that's what they've got going on, and it's effective right now.
All right, you mentioned Texas's schedule. Here's what they now have.
It got harder this week.
Changed. Yeah. Now, again, we don't know because you don't know. You kind of do, but they have the rivalry game with Oklahoma, who has looked just above average. It depends on what you want to look at. What is just above average? They got beaten by Tennessee, remember, at home, a couple of weeks ago. So Oklahoma rivalry game, and I never thought Texas would lose to OU last year. And then Dylan Gabriel and company had a phenomenal game, and Texas could not hold on to the lead. Georgia, night game in Austin Saturday. At Vanderbilt, Florida. At Arkansas, another rivalry game. Kentucky, who can just be a pain in your ass, and then at Texas A&M. So their schedule in the SEC, which initially you're like, they got 3 games they got to get through. A rivalry game with Oklahoma, a rivalry game against A&M. Don't worry about that Arkansas game, Vanderbilt game. At least now that gets your attention, probably the best thing that could happen for Steve Sarkisian at his football program. And speaking of which, Steve Sarkisian saying that if, in fact, the Oklahoma and Texas game was played today, then Quinn Ewers would start. And that's not breaking news, but at least it's on record now after he's been out for a little bit with Arch Manning having himself a go as the starting quarterback with the University of Texas. That game, 2:30 kickoff. We've seen that as an 11 o'clock game many times when it was on in the Big 12. That's a 2:30 kickoff coming up this Saturday.
What do you think the people of the fair would do if the SEC floated out? Like, what if we did this at night? Would they like, no, we
can't afford the police officer.
We're going to block the gates.
Yeah, they'll be just more juiced up at 2:30 than they were already at 11 o'clock. But that's the game, the 2:30 game in the afternoon on Saturday. The 11 o'clock game has prestige at times. The night game on ABC, but this is 2:30 this weekend, Texas and OU. I have let's go to the top 25. All right? Here's the top 25 for this week. Now, you had number 1, number 4, and number 9 lose. This is this week. You have 8 teams in the SEC that were ranked in the top 25 last year. I don't see anybody here but maybe Missouri and Oklahoma. They kind of need that. They did win the game at Auburn, which was a great comeback. But Missouri and Oklahoma are a little bit flawed, a little bit. I don't know. We don't know. But they're in the top 25. But now they have one more team in the top 25 after the crazy weekend, and that team is at 15, jumping from out of the poll, at least in the AP poll, into the top 25, all the way up to number 15. So you have 1, 5, 7, 8, 9, 15, 18, and 21. The AP top 25 poll. Ohio State, Oregon played this week, And that, of course, one of the bangers this week. But how about that game coming up?
Well, how about the Big Ten's got 2, 3, and 4?
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nice as well, although 2 and 3, as you mentioned, would be separated. But they got 3 of the top 4, so that's something there. Miami creeping up, giving the ACC a little something that they, otherwise don't have from Florida State this year. No offense, Paul, not taking a shot, but just like that's one of the teams you thought would be up there. So Miami's carrying that torch. Clemson's carrying that torch very well. All the poo-poo about them this offseason, and here they are, and they're playing really well. Cade Klubnik's playing really well. But, yeah, I mean, the thing that jumps out to me is Texas got just, a red carpet to the number 1 spot without any doubts because of all that happened around them without them even having to play. And then, the Big Ten takes over the rest of that top 4. But there's a little sprinkling of, a couple ACC teams and Iowa State trying to move their way into the top 10 as well. BYU right there on the cusp. So it's a nice little mix of teams and not that logjam at the top of just SEC that it felt like it was the first month of the season or so.
And it's not a red carpet that they just were given number
no,
one.
But it's like a free walk, though.
Yeah,
like they didn't play and everybody lost.
Yeah, absolutely. After Alabama had jumped them, which now you wonder why. The week before, yes, they had the dramatic win against Georgia. Now, let's look at a couple of more things. This is from Brett Yormark. He spoke with Joseph Duarte of the Big 12 when it comes to the Big 10 and the SEC and the conversation about having even more teams who are automatic bids in the future. Not for this year, won't be for at least another couple of 2 or 3 years, but Brett Yormark did speak with Joseph Duarte about this. You can read all that, or you can also just listen to what I have to say about what he had to say. Can we make sure that people earn it? Don't give anybody a free pass. You know who doesn't get a free pass in the NFL? Everybody. Everybody. Nobody in the NFL gets a free pass. You might say, well, this is not the NFL. It's pretty damn close right now. So nobody gets a free pass in any professional league. When it gets to the playoffs, you have to earn it based on wins and losses. And you don't even have quality wins to get you in the playoffs. In the NFL, you have a record. You have a 11-6, or you're 10-7, or you're 3-14, and you sit home. You have to earn it. And in college football, that's basically what Brett Yormark's trying to say, too.
Okay. Do you guys feel like this whole automatic bids thing is – there's always something like when you come to collective bargaining, which this is, when you're bargaining out, what your thing is going to be. Like in the NFL, Major League Baseball, whenever there's a labor tension, there's like a major issue that the players always give in on because they're like, oh, you can have Sunday, like you can have Wednesdays off now.
Well, you don't have off. You don't have the workouts in the off season.
Yeah. So but then they give up something that's way bigger and more important. I think that this is the SEC and Big Ten's bargaining ploy so that they can keep grifting the money away going, well, if we back off of this, we still get more money, right? I think if they keep that in the conversation constantly, even though, especially Greg Sankey knows automatic bids means he's going to get less teams in because they're going to have to fill out the other ones before he can do that, and some of his good teams might get left out. But if he keeps floating out there, then the other conferences will be like, listen, just please don't shut us out. Take more money.
Yeah, Snakey and Petiti are definitely, flexing their muscle and have been for quite a while now. And I think it's come to a point where everybody has to put their feet in the ground and fight back. I think you've had points where guys have decided it's not worth the fight because we just want inclusion, right? Like we just want to be included. We just need to have our playoff spot. Just, please let us be in the club with you guys. I think at this point you got to say to hell with it. If we set the club on fire, we set it on fire. But we're going to make sure that you're the one that everybody knows is to blame for this all, Greg Snakey, because you are as much as anything else. And, the comments last week that he made that went viral probably weren't as egregious as a lot of the reaction to it. Certainly wasn't surprising if you've been following anything that he's said for the most part for the last couple of years. He's worried about the SEC and the SEC alone as the SEC commission. That's all he should be worried about, so I don't blame him for that. But you can't help but see the little fingerprints all over and the sort of usage of their arsenal of power, right, and the consolidation of that and how they've used that to twist everybody else into agreeing to giving them more and more and more. And it's like, all right, when's enough? You've already got all the advantages when it comes to money and TV platform and prestige and rankings and everything else. And now you're going to continue to just want more and more and more. At some point, everybody's got to say no. And you know what? If they say, well, all right, we're leaving, well, then so damn be it. But the whole, we're just going to give everything that they ask for so that they just continue to bring us along with them, I think this is going to take you down the path where you're all just a bunch of Vanderbilts. Yeah, you got not new Vanderbilt, but old Vanderbilt. We're yeah, you've got a shot, but you're already way behind the 8 ball because you've given so much more to them just to be a part of this that you're at an extreme disadvantage just to say that you were a part of the club, so to speak. So screw giving yourself even more disadvantages. I say you push back. You push back on these auto bids. I know your Mark's comments were very much of the effect that this isn't a done deal just yet, that there's still a lot of talk and then a lot of the panicking's premature about the actual format moving forward. I know he's also setting this all up. His strategy has to play into wanting basketball to be something different in the future, so he's got to politic and play his games. But as far as just outside looking in, it's you've given a lot of concessions to the SEC, and there's always this huge threat of, if you don't follow along, they're going to leave you. At some point, you got to call the bluff. And guess what? You're not going to be the bad guy if you do that. No matter what any state media wants to say about it, you're just fighting for yourself. And it's time everybody fights for themselves. And I think that's been the case to some degree. I also think there's been a lot of panic and, oh, my God, we better do what they say or we're kicked out of the club. And I don't know. I think that you got to start fighting back a little bit.
I think you at least have to. You have to at least. You don't be bullied over what really is revenue and ratings and stuff like that. But and last weekend's another reason why automatic bids, whatever. But yeah, I agree with you, Craig, 100%. I think most anyone would. Even SEC fans, I think, want to make sure that they earn it. But to just say, no, you get 4. What if this is the year the SEC really only has 2 top 10 teams?
Or the Big Ten, for that matter. They get to just be on the side and not take any of the shrapnel because Sankey's more out front than Petiti is, but they're doing the same thing. Yep. And it's all based on the fact that they're 100 years old or whatever, more than anything else. And I know it's fan base size and all this. It's the metrics that show that they deserve the most. Imagine that they use more often than not. But yeah, I think it's about time you stand up for yourself and you push back a little bit, especially on these, we each deserve 4 automatic bids. F you, dude. How about, you earn it on the field. What a novel idea. And if you cave eventually and you give them 3, well, that's still a win. You don't just say, oh, yeah, no, here's 4 just so that you guys remain happy, because then it's going to be 5. And then it's going to be an expanded playoff again, and then they're going to each want 6. And it's never going to stop because you're never going to stop giving in to what they want under this ominous threat of this, theoretical breakaway. So I think it's about time you turn the tide, fight for yourselves, and don't allow them just a cakewalk to have a potentially average team waltz into the playoffs simply because the brand that they're a part of.
Again, nobody, I agree. The Cowboys don't get an automatic bid to the playoffs because of the Cowboys. They don't. And if the NFL does it that way, and you say, again, it's not, yes, they are basically all but the NFL. Now, couple of notes from the Big 12 weekend. I put this up in the chat room. We will get to this in the next segment because of the pod that we have. But which teams in the Big 12 are more fragile? Think about this. Which teams, in your opinion, right now are more fragile? Oklahoma State, Baylor, Kansas, or UCF? Who's losing players like they're jumping off the ship right now with the transfer portal? We're starting to see that. Not just the quarterback from UNLV, a lot of other teams are starting to deal with that.
6 players already for UCF, including their kicker, Colton Boomer, who's the latest one. It just makes you wonder what's going on there. What's the deal? Why not stay in? I mean, they've lost 2 games. They're still in this thing. One of the games they lost doesn't even affect the conference at all. Losing to Florida only affects their morale.
Yeah, but their morale
as a fan base, and it seems low right now. So Gus needs a spark. Something's got to happen there.
Yeah, the Colorado game. Weird. The Colorado game, I think, broke them mentally. I don't know about all the other stuff, Craig.
I mean, yeah, the UCF transfers are unfortunate. Xavier Townsend a part of that as well. But I mean, the answer is Baylor, and it's not even close. Yeah. That's the coach that's going to get fired if things don't turn around. Not Mike Gundy.
I'm sorry, I didn't bring up TCU. Go ahead.
It's Baylor. Yeah. Maybe Sonny Dykes does get fired. That would be totally TCU to fire him and not wait 2 extra years to see if he pans out and just go grab G.J. Kinney or Jeff Traylor or whoever the hot name is. Yeah, TCU, it sucks right now for them. They are a mess. The culture doesn't seem like it's in very good shape.
You're right. And one of the things that happened – go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, one of the things that happened is they had a really nice start. The week before, they were down 28-7 at Iowa State and then got blown out. Here is our good friend Chad Settle, Iowa State fan that I met a few years back when I was visiting Ames, Iowa. Here is what they have is, yes, that is a wild hog. They took him off ice at 1 o'clock in the morning, then put him on the heat at 2 o'clock in the morning. Everyone started to get served at 1:30 or 2, and with all the fixins, the tailgate master from Ames, Iowa, Chad Settle, and then also from Iowa. Those are the two pictures. Chad, thanks for sending that. This is the best picture in college football yet this year. Jalen Jackson, the running back of the Cyclones. That's not like the angle makes it look different. That's the running back as a part of a running game that punched Baylor in the mouth over and over again. That little guy, among others, just had himself a game against Baylor.
I think he was the guy who frustrated them the most, by far. Like that, like not getting, like every time it looked like they maybe, okay, you've got a 3rd and 7. They're at a spot where they didn't want to throw. They'd hand off to him. He'd get the first down. You know, he was fantastic.
Yeah, he was really good. I mean, that was a good showing for him, and that's cool pictures. Thanks for sending that along. Like, going with our conversation, TCU's in a funk right now, and Oklahoma State's in a funk. We're going to do
that in the pod, but go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, going back to my answer, Baylor's the clear answer. I don't care how bad TCU's in a funk in Funky Town, or Gundy's losing his grip in Stillwater, or whoever else you want to throw into the mix. You can't throw Houston now. They're loving life, but I think it's clearly Baylor, and Iowa State put it on them this past weekend. It was a fun game in the beginning, at least competitive game in the beginning. Was still a close game at halftime, was a close game early part of the third quarter. And you wondered if Baylor was going to have, that upset trick up their sleeve, but then it all just unraveled in the, early to mid-third quarter. And from that point on, it was more of the same old song from Dave Aranda's Bears of, big, huge mistakes that are massively costly for you, the types of things you can't do on the road to beat a top 15-ish team at their place, especially when they've got an electric atmosphere. They know how to do the whiteouts right. Like, I see a lot of programs. They got, like, I'm like, where do you, like, what do your fans listen to during the week that they just showed up in the usual color? Like, everybody else is in white, and, like, here's this dude in purple, and here's this dude in green. It's like Iowa State, it was, like, all whiteout. I mean, they did it to what looked like pretty much perfection. There weren't these random, like, weird pockets of, like, just people who lost the memo somewhere along the way or whatever.
Or just don't care.
Or just don't care, which that's also like, I mean, have a little fun for God's sakes. Like, damn, you need attention that bad. But anyways, like, that seemed like it was an electric atmosphere. It was a probably more competitive game than a lot of Cyclones fans maybe anticipated, just given kind of the talk around Baylor right now. But ultimately, it was a dominant blowout win. It was the second biggest win in that, albeit like quarter of a century long series between these two teams. So college football-wise, that's not really anything major, but still 25-ish years of playing each other. That was the second biggest win total, or winning margin, I should say, for Iowa State against Baylor. And, yeah, they pulled away and left no doubts about who the better team was when all was said and done. So they're in a good spot right now. They are right there in the thick of things as far as being in the race for the Big 12 championship. And being 2-0 is a great place to find yourself. So at 5-0 overall, I mean, they're right where you want to be and right where you might find yourselves, building off of to maybe going to win that first 10-game season in school history. They've never won more than 9 games ever, and they are positioned really well to compete for the Big 12, to compete for a playoff spot, to compete for a historical season. Mm-hmm. There's a lot in front of them, and that was a great win for them on Saturday. But, yeah, Baylor is by far the most in the mud because their coach is the one that's on the hottest of all hot seats, and they're the one that can't beat anybody that matters. They beat teams that they're favored to beat, and then anybody in the Big 12, bets are off, probably not going to beat them, especially if they're ranked or any good whatsoever. Yeah, probably not going to win that game. It has been a year and a half of just
it's been
nothingness.
2 years.
Like but of nothingness. I mean, name the substantial wins. There's not one. There's a come from, like, there's the close kick against Cincinnati at Cincinnati, which you look back, that wasn't some great Cincinnati team. There was beating UCF in a game you were getting your asses kicked, and you were fortunate to come back. Thank you, Gus. And you won that game. And beyond that, you beat Tarleton. Okay. You paid them to beat them. You beat Air Force. Okay, that was a measure of revenge because they beat you in a bowl game and embarrassed you a couple years ago, but that wasn't the same Air Force team. You also paid them to beat them at home. So outside of the games, you paid teams to come to your place to beat them, and even then that didn't work against Texas State last year. You have beaten the two newbies a year ago in games that basically came down to the wire, and you've won nothing else. Not a single upset.
You did
not
not
a
bring
big
up,
win.
You did not give him credit for Long Island.
I mentioned the teams you paid to beat.
No,
but that's all you've done
Yep.
in 2 years. You beat Cincy and UCF by the skin of your teeth, and you beat like 3 teams you paid to beat. That's all you've done. You've done nothing.
No,
so
it's
you
been-
are by far in the bottom spot.
Since the middle of 2022,
Yeah.
since winning in Lubbock and winning in Oklahoma and Norman, you have won basically nothing. And we'll get back. The Big 12 South pod is next. One note as well about if you get rid of a coach now. Well, you're going to lose the signing class, or you're going to lose. Who cares? I'm sorry. If the coach coming in can't replace who he wants, you think that the bigger schools care about whether you lose a sign? No, they still will end up in the top 10 or 20. I know Baylor normally is not ranked very high, even some of their best teams ever. But you have to make a move. You cannot be held hostage because of a signing class or the transfer portal.
Yeah, I've seen that random conversation. I mean, I don't think you hold anything together just for a signing class because they could all just transfer out after a year. So there's nothing. If this is the old days where you're at least getting them all for 4 years, sure. But this, you can flip it over in months. So
But
it doesn't matter.
If you get the right coach, he can bring in his.
But I also
talent.
don't know what doing it right now does any good for you
Well,
either.
that's true too. Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah.
I think there's that November 1st window is where you probably need to kind of tell recruits like, okay, this is where we're going.
Yeah.
So make up your mind.
Here's another thing. And Baylor, I've always been told this, has money when they need it. They have plenty of money no matter what we want to hear about the revenue. If they need the money, they'll need it. There's going to be a buyout for Aranda. There might be an expensive buyout for the staff. Maybe the incoming coach wants to keep some of them. That's part of the discussions. And, you're going to have to go to the portal. Well, the GXG's been doing that anyway.
There's also the house settlement.
Yeah, and that's part of a story about that was at least approved from the initial part of it today by the judge, and we'll get into that today a little bit more in a minute.
But I'm just saying that's another $15 million maybe
22.
that you're. Well, if you want to pay 22, it can be. I would say on average though, most teams will probably pay minimum like $15 million, and then some will pay 22 and go maxed out. I don't know what Baylor's plans for that are, but you do take that into account when you're also thinking about buyouts for Aranda or the staff or whoever. But yeah, you don't keep this together the way that it is just for a recruiting class that has the ability to leave whenever they want to. But yeah, I'm very intrigued by what ultimately what they decide to do because I mean the apathy is set in, guys. I mean it's undeniable. It's just there's nothing of substance on the branch anymore. It's the same story, different Saturday basically. And you have no faith they're going to go and beat anybody else remaining on this schedule. Even Houston, Houston beat them last year.
I said this in the pregame. Why can't they go do a Houston like what Houston had done the night before against TCU? Gentry Estes at a little after 4 o'clock writes for the Tennessean on what it was like over the weekend at Nashville. Ari Temkin, Big 12 Radio at 4:25. Phil Bennett at 5 and also Paul's Top 5. But coming up, the Big 12 South Pod. We've done quite a bit on Baylor. Texas Tech, how about what Joey McGuire and company are doing, winning close games and coming back on the road after blowing a 15-point lead, plus TCU. Boy. And then also today, Oklahoma State. Bruh. All that and more. This is 365 Sports. Petty Clinic, lowt.com. Dr. Kent Petty can help you become the high-performance man you want to be, need to be, and used to be. How? Contact them on the website at pettycliniclowt.com. There's also a cell phone number, an office number, and also an email. Tell them I sent you. If you have some of the symptomatic issues of low testosterone, and one that, you hear a lot about ED or sex drive or all of that, it could be you just don't feel right. and you have a pretty good diet, and you're somewhat fit or you're active, you just are lethargic. That could be testosterone that's dropped in your body as you get older. Father Time wins that. 1 out of every 3 or 4 men have symptomatic issues of low testosterone. You tired of it? Why not at least get it checked? It might not be, but 1 out of every 3 or 4 men, it is. Low testosterone at pettycliniclowt.com.
The Jeep Adventure Days closeout at Allen Samuels just got bigger and better than ever with $15,000 off a 2024 Jeep Grand Cherokee Overland Demo with a V8 Hemi. Or how about a 2023 Dodge Charger RT with $15,000 off? Or a Charger Scat Pack with $11,000 off. Ask about the hot deals on the 2024 Wagoneers and get 3.9% for 72 months. Only at Allen Samuels in Waco.
Come by. Let's be friends.
In Texas, there's pea-size hail and baseball-size hail. Guess which one hit our house? We didn't even know where to begin, but we called our Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent, and he was so reassuring. He knew exactly what to do to get our house back into shape and our lives back to normal. Now, we're even more thankful for the roof over our heads.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
Ghost Hydration is a fully transparent, fully loaded, full-flavored hydration drink that we've all been waiting for. Ghost is caffeine-free with electrolytes, 0 sugar, and low sodium that'll hydrate your body before, during, and after your workout. Consumer loved with authentic flavors, so grab and enjoy a Sour Patch Kids Blue Raspberry and Red Berry, along with the Kiwi Strawberry, Orange Squeeze, or Lemon Lime. Ghost Hydration can truly be used anytime. Remember, it's formulated for sports, but made for life.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at idealmri.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
When you work with a bank, you should expect the best of everything. That includes face-to-face personal service and the kind of community banking care that only comes from one neighbor to another. That's exactly what you'll get from the First National Bank of Central Texas, where you will know your banker works just as hard as you do. Once again, that's the First National Bank of Central Texas. Settle for nothing less than the first. Member FDIC.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
All right, we talked quite a bit about Baylor and of the most fragile teams in the Big 12. TCU, believe me, there's drama in Fort Worth. They're unhappy in Orlando and also in Stillwater. Gundy's fine, but there's a lot of disappointment going on there. So let's talk about a team out of all 4 of these teams in the pod. Texas Tech, 3-0 in the conference. I have to admit this. Late on Saturday night, I was kind of like falling. And they were up 18-3. I dozed off downstairs watching the big flat screen. I dozed off. I said, they're fine. And then I woke up, and they had won the game. I'm like, okay. Then I look at how they had lost the lead and found a way to beat Arizona, Arizona on the road in a tough place to play.
I got to say I was wrong about one thing. I said hit the over on this.
Yeah.
Should have taken the under. It hit the under, only 50 points on this, which is why you won't see me doing videos where I'm like, these are your big bets for the weekend. I'm not that guy. But, yeah, no, it was impressive. I didn't make it through this one, or Miami and Cal either. Like, it was just too much. Couldn't make it. I had to save it for the Cowboys game last night. But, yeah, they fought it off. They didn't, whip the ball around the yard. Taj Brooks had 3 touchdowns. And as Taj Brooks goes, so goes the the Red Raider offense. So
part of the Big 12 Players of the Week, by the way, this week.
That's kind of how it is for them.
Yeah, I mean, Tech totally outplayed, outperformed, outcoached, outclassed Arizona. I was really unimpressed with Arizona as much as I was impressed with Texas Tech. I really felt like for a team hosting a big night game, and we'll get to their pod later, I was just very underwhelmed by how they showed up to that game, whereas Texas Tech kicking off at 10 o'clock Central Time on the road where they're not typically very good. They seemed like a team that was ready to go in there and change the narrative, and they did. They flipped the narrative, and they're off to an incredible start at 5-1. Maybe the hottest team in the league. I know BYU could have something to say about that. I know K-State, is in the mix as far as the teams that people believe in still. Even Utah with Cam Rising, but Texas Tech has to be right there in that conversation. They had an embarrassing loss to Wazoo, where you kind of wondered, especially after the way the opener went against ACU, of just what this team was even going to be and how they were going to operate moving forward. And they've reeled off 4 straight wins, 3 in the Big 12. A 3-0 start in the Big 12 is absolutely massive. And guess what? They've got 2 weeks off, or they got a week off, and guess who they get to play? At home, Baylor. So good chance they're 4-0. Then they play TCU. There's a good chance they could be, so like you start looking at it, and because of the way they started off, they are in the driver's seat. They're in the driver's seat at 3-0 in the Big 12, along with, a BYU and Iowa State. Don't want to forget them either. But this wasn't just like Taj Brook run the ball. They were dominating the first half. It didn't necessarily show on the scoreboard as far as like a blowout looking total, but 18-3, it was pretty dominant. They were getting stops on defense. Arizona offense was just funky. Tech's just got so many like Matt Rule qualities. Like they're just always super physical. They're always trying to rip the ball out. They always seem like they're playing harder than the other team. It felt that way on Saturday night. It felt they were better coached than the other team. It felt they had showed up and were ready to pull the big win on the road that had been so elusive, and it got dicey because Arizona did mount a comeback. They were able to, force some punts. They had a couple fumbles that Texas Tech can't afford to do that in other games, or else that'll probably cost them. But they were able to overcome that, which I think speaks volumes about the culture, and they were able to, just stick with it, and eventually Taj Brooks breaks through and ends it for you. But they've got a really good wide receiver. Michael Hudson had a huge catch that should have been a touchdown, but he fell down. Caleb Douglas was great. Like Kelly's really good. Like they've got an offense that's really doing a lot of really good things, and they got a defense that plays hard, even though they're not great or even veteran in some spots. And Arizona, like McMillan had some yards, but he had a huge fumble in that game. That was a great play by Texas Tech's defense that swung the momentum back around. So it was a game of waves, but Texas Tech just stayed in the fight and made the biggest plays at the biggest moments. And I was just thoroughly impressed by just their whole demeanor, because I think that's the kind of culture win that is going to serve them very, very well moving forward. And they've also got some talent as well. So I think that was huge to go and beat Arizona.
You know what I think? You mentioned some of the identity or the character. They play hard.
Yes.
Now, I mean, so, you see that with teams that are not winning, but there's a rhyme and a reason to it. I mean, they play like this is their last game.
They don't play clean by any stretch of the imagination.
They're
not great across the board by any means.
But you can make up for not playing clean with effort.
Well, dude, the fumble, like they're trailing. They were trailing 19-18. They kick a field goal after Arizona could have extended the lead. They miss. Tech makes theirs. So now Tech's got the lead 21-19. Arizona gets the ball back, and there's like less than 3 minutes to play. There's 2.5 minutes to play in the game. Tetero McMillan gets the ball across the middle, is running down, and strip him, fumble. It was clearly something they had seen on video to some extent based on the conversation around that play. But you make that play, and boom, he fumbles, and it just flips right back around. You go down and score a touchdown, and the game, for all intents and purposes, was kind of over then because Arizona needed 2 scores, and they were only able to manage 1 with the time remaining. So, like, that effort right there, like, just stripping McMillan, that won you the game. Little plays like that, even though that wasn't a little play, but plays like that won you the game, and there was a lot of those plays throughout this game.
And if the defense needs to make a play, which they don't make a lot of them, but the pick last week against Cincinnati, we have a guest in 5 minutes. He's also got an interview deadline, so we're going to go to the next one up. What in the hell? I saw former players whining and bitching and moaning about something Kazadi said to them. One, they're losing. Houston beat them up on Friday, which was shocking to me. Right now, Sonny Dykes has himself a handful of mud.
Yeah, he told us about a culture problem that they had a year ago. I wonder if that still exists. Like, if you didn't really solve all that. They've got a quarterback that I think most everybody would want, Josh Hoover. He's really talented.
He turns the ball over too much, though.
Yeah, absolutely. They had turnover, they had fumbles the other night. They had interceptions. They did everything wrong. Houston got a boost from Zion Chris, and TCU didn't have a defensive answer for him, and they don't have defensive answers for a lot of things, but they're an absolute mess right now. There's not a ton of chemistry there. They've got some good things going, but defensively, they get behind it like they did, and then they just don't see the fight.
There seems to be more than just what's on the field, though. There seems to be a lot circulating.
And the ex-players were complaining because they were getting yelled at by the assistant to the head coach asking who they were. Well, we're former players on the sideline, but that's the kind of cultural thing that's going on right now is you've got those types of things happening that typically don't happen anywhere, where you got guys yelling at players that are alumni on the sideline. So, I don't know if they didn't have passes or what, but we also know Kazadi, and I can see that. I can envision that without any problem whatsoever. Josh Hoover's good, but he turns the ball over too much, and that's a killer for them. He's easily their bright spot, but when he does that, it negates a lot of the good from that. They can't run the ball to save their lives. This run game's non-existent, and they've got some really talented receivers, but you can't just have a couple hundred yards of receiving with a couple picks and no run game and expect to win most games when your defense isn't that good either. So, yeah, they're a mess across the board, and I don't know what the ultimate issue is, but it does feel like the culture's a little bit rotten, and it's not necessarily carryover from last year, but maybe it is, or maybe it's an entirely new problem. Regardless, I think TCU fans rightfully have a lot of concern about the Dykes era, if you will, and just what that looks like moving forward.
They have the off week, and they may need it to just kind of let everyone out, let some steam out. Then they play at Utah, home against Texas Tech, and then the rest of the schedule follows that. Oklahoma State.
Ugh.
They're always pretty steady with Mike Gundy. They have some they trip a little bit here and there, but man, whoo!
Well, we're not going to hear about.
West Virginia came into Stillwater and obviously win that game.
Well, we're not going to hear about trying to spin the Utah game was actually close, like we heard at the end of last week. Remember that? That wasn't a blowout. You lost. Okay, well then, what was this? This is a blowout.
They've lost 3 straight games. They've lost 3.
This is a blowout. They're 0-3 in the conference. They are just without life, without hope, and without any excitement, certainly right now. Not only did they get blown out, and this was a real blowout on the scoreboard, it happened at T-Boone Pickens Stadium, where they've now lost 2 conference games, where that used to be like a fortress that you hardly ever had anybody roll in there. And it's happened with relative ease now twice by Utah and West Virginia. Alan Bowman's not a good quarterback, even though he's had more practice than anybody in college football, not named like Cam Rising at this point. He's not very good. They had to replace him, and you've already done that twice now, so I don't know how you keep going back to that. Ollie Gordon's a non-factor, got injured, and who knows how much we even see of him moving forward because they don't have a run game with or without him, so why is he going to go out there and get hurt and injure his draft stock? They still have really good wide receivers, but that's about the one bright spot on this team. I don't know what the deal is there. This is not at all what people imagined when they ran it back, and there's not a whole lot of signs for them turning this around and being that much better down the stretch. So you go to Provo next, night game. There's some winnable games after that, but that's what's up next. And so you're staring straight at 0-4 potentially here in a couple weeks, but they also are a team that needed a break, and they're getting a break this weekend.
Yep.
And like TCU and Baylor, they certainly need it.
They need to have some come-to-Jesus type meetings between the staff, the players, and I guess even within the athletic department with former players too.
And I don't want to mention just the offense. The defense stinks.
Yeah.
The defense got just totally thrashed by
80
Garrett
points
Green
in the last 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, they got ran all over. Great win for West Virginia. We'll talk about them more in depth in a different pod, but that was a great win for Neil Brown, and that was an awful loss for Mike Gundy, who is not on a hot seat because he's earned so much, goodwill, but you do wonder if, he's losing his touch a little bit with them, and this is not the first time you've been in a position to wonder that. It's not even probably the 100th time people have wondered that after certain losses over the years, but this is bad. Like they are not good, and they don't look like they're going to be that much better moving forward because there's not a magical quarterback replacement that's coming in or a magical defensive replacement.
When you look on their schedule and you go to whatever site and you look at their 3 games, back-to-back-to-back L's, and that's just with Utah, with K-State, and also West Virginia, 38-14 at home. And you got to wonder right now where they are, but they need a break, and they're about to get one, as Craig, you mentioned, and at BYU, which right now is as steady as anybody in the Big 12, Iowa State, K-State, and who we'll see what Utah is themselves. What a weekend it was in Nashville, Tennessee. Ari Temkin from the Big 12 Radio Network and TuneIn Radio will join us, and we'll have a lot more to get to with him on the conference. Gentry Estes writes for the Tennessean. They beat Alabama. We went through all the historical facts and all the history and then even the goalpost and more. Gentry joins Craig Paul. I'm David Smoak. Gentry, thank you very much. I know Nashville is an entertainment city, and they have a lot of big events that occur. How would you compare Saturday night with that win against Alabama to anything else you see in Nashville?
Well, you're right. There is a lot of big events here. They've had a few big moments and some big sports moments here in the time I've been here. Well, I would say this time was different because it was the first time that Vanderbilt football was front and center and kind of got the attention of the whole city. If anyone knows how Nashville is laid out, the journey those goalposts took out of the stadium, going down Broadway into the lower Broadway into kind of the touristy district right by Bridgestone Arena. That's not a short journey. They went pretty far down the street there. It's almost like a parade going into the city. And I can promise you there are probably some people in Lower Broad that had no idea what was going on and why there was a goalpost coming through. But that was the first. I would say all day today, seems like every conversation I've had for the last 48 hours, it's been about that game. And I can't remember a time that Vanderbilt football was getting that kind of attention.
Clark Lee said something when he got hired that he expected Vanderbilt to be the best football program in America. Now, while they're still far off from that, everybody kind of ridiculed him. Does this give him some of that credibility that he believed in himself, he believed in the program, he believed in the potential of the program, and he just needed some time to do it?
Maybe to an extent, and he referenced that after the game on Saturday, and it's kind of easy, I guess. And he admitted, it's kind of easy to say that, but I would say I don't think he said he expected to be, but the goal was to make that, the best program in the country. And it was a bold statement for any Vanderbilt coach to say that. And I said at the time, I think a lot of, what he meant by that was, you're including the academic piece and some other aspects, and winning at life kind of thing, but I do, certainly understand why people would snicker when Vanderbilt says things that Vanderbilt's football certainly isn't supposed to say. And I feel like to get a win like this certainly does validate a lot of the things that Clark has been doing with that program, just because, they had a couple of SEC wins a couple of seasons ago, but other than that, there really hasn't been a lot during his 3 years there to cheer about. And it seems like this season they figured some things out. They made a lot of changes this last offseason. They brought in new coaches, new players. There was a pretty substantial turnover in terms of the roster, guys leaving to the portal, and who they brought in, and the roles for the players they brought in. In a lot of ways, it was kind of a new team, and the coaching staff was kind of rebuilt as well. And there were so many changes. You kind of came into the season not really knowing what to expect, and then they go out the first game and beat Virginia Tech. So I think a lot of the country today is kind of shocked by what Vanderbilt was able to do against Alabama. And look, it is shocking. I don't think anybody showed up in that stadium on Saturday expecting the result that we got. But at the same time, Vanderbilt had already kind of shown this season that they were a feisty team. They were a good bit better. And I told people last week I thought Alabama was going to win the game, obviously, but I also felt like there was a chance Alabama was going to come out flat after the game they played against Georgia. And I told people then, I said, Vanderbilt's the kind of team that if they do come out flat and they kind of let them hang around, they have the ability to make things difficult for Alabama. And, Vanderbilt they had kind of already shown they were that kind of team this year.
When did the crowd start to buy in? Like, what was that atmosphere like on Saturday? It's funny. You see the construction in the background going on and stuff like that, but a place not known for its home field advantage necessarily, but by the end, just total chaos. Just kind of how did that ebb and flow, and when do you think that people kind of got the sense like, oh, wait a second, like this might be that day?
Yeah, most of the crowd was Alabama fans,
to
be honest. And it usually has been that way. The clip of Nick Saban from a couple of weeks ago saying that every place to play in the SEC is difficult except Vanderbilt because Vanderbilt, you have more fans there than they do, and it's true. It is. And it was certainly the case on Saturday. I think, if anything, it may have worked against Alabama a little bit because I feel like the more that game went on, the more realistic it seemed that this could happen. And, the more I think you see that with home teams sometimes when a big upset could be happening, when a whole place gets nervous and you can kind of feel the tension. It was a little bit like that.
How does this help their recruiting? Now, look, they recruit from a smaller pool than most of the teams in the SEC because of the academic standards. But like Notre Dame or other places, like Northwestern, Vanderbilt has a bar you have to hit that other schools don't. But does this help them get maybe a bigger corner on the smart kids?
It can't hurt, I guess, but it also can't hurt that they put a lot more into NIL this last year. I think that's a big deal. They were kind of behind on that in a lot of sports. The basketball coach said it too, and I think Vanderbilt's made more of a commitment in terms of NIL. And obviously, you reference the construction of the stadium. I feel like the facilities were pretty far behind for a long time. They've done a lot of work in terms of trying to get the facilities up, and it's ongoing work to try to get the facilities going. So I feel like Vanderbilt's been trying a little more here the last couple of years, and when it comes to just investing the resources needed to be successful in college football right now, I think that's really what it's going to come down to.
I'd actually watched a good bit of Diego Pavia because of an award I work with, and just kind of seeing his stats and highlights and whatnot, catching games every week. He was a very entertaining player. Didn't know how it would translate necessarily over to Vanderbilt, but man, what an electric factory, huh?
Yeah, he's been able to come in and kind of transform this team, and heck of a player. I'm not sure if he's a pro, but I feel like in terms of just being a college quarterback, Pavia is exactly what you would want for. He's kind of that gritty underdog, chip on his shoulder, so to speak, and he's kind of rubbed off on the rest of Vanderbilt's team, and you could get the sense even back in the preseason what his leadership was meaning to this group. And, he comes in along with his head coach and his offensive coordinator that he had last season at New Mexico State. That's a huge advantage. Eli Sowers was getting Eli Sowers had a good game on Saturday too. That's another player from New Mexico State. They were able to bring in, essentially co-opt New Mexico State's program. They ended up getting Jerry Kill and Tim Beck both in here. There were other coaches that joined him. There were other players that joined. And people in the SEC knew who these people were because New Mexico State went to Auburn and beat them last year. And you kind of got the sense, not only are you bringing in these key guys, but you're bringing them in with the coaches they already had, with a system they were already running in a comfortable situation. I think that's been a big deal for them.
I tell you what, when I watched the game, and I kind of watched the scores initially because I was watching something else too, and then I started watching the game. They doubled Alabama in rushing yards, 42-18 in time of possession, which has a lot to do with the fact that they ran 54 times, I think, compared to 21. There was nothing about this game, Gentry, that was a fluke, and there was nothing weird that happened, like a fumble return for a touchdown. This was straight up Vanderbilt was better on Saturday.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think anybody that watched the game would show you this was not an accident. They absolutely beat Alabama on the lines of scrimmage, which is not anything I would have ever expected to see. Vanderbilt's transformation there has been has been substantial. And they have a kind of offense that if you let them get into comfortable down and distance situations, third and short, that kind of thing, they will keep the ball on you forever. They will run the play clock down. They want to be able to kill off the game. It played right into Vanderbilt's hands how that game went on Saturday, because Vanderbilt was able to get a 13-0 lead right out of the gate, and they were able to, I think, hold the ball something like 10 minutes on their second touchdown drive, which actually made it 20-7, I believe, because Alabama made a stupid penalty where they had two guys out on the field wearing both having the number 2 jersey, and they got flagged for it on a 4th and 4, and the 5 yards gave Vanderbilt a first down, and they were able to end up taking 10 minutes off the clock with a touchdown drive. That game started out that way. You had Vanderbilt coming off a bye week. You had Alabama who had just played an absolute war against Georgia the week before, and you could just see it set up perfectly for Vanderbilt the way the game went, that they would have more in the fourth quarter, and that's how it ended up going. When you have 42 minutes of possession time, that's usually how that goes.
Gentry, a couple of Texans on the offensive side for the Commodores had big games. Cedric Alexander, also Eli Stowers. I know, it's kind of well documented. He was a quarterback at A&M and now a tight end, but a big performance by him. Just kind of what have you seen maybe from those guys in terms of their impact Saturday, but just in also terms of kind of changing this shift towards, brighter days for Vanderbilt football?
You mean those guys like the New Mexico State transfers?
Like Eli Stowers and Cedric Alexander.
I mean, Cedric Alexander is a good player. He was a good player last year. I feel like they were able to retain some key guys. He was one of them. I think C.J. Taylor on defense has been one of them. A guy named Raymond Fontenette was a transfer from TCU. I think he's a pro. He's a guy they've added to the secondary. He's been a really good player. They added. They did add a lot of talent this last year who's really been able to help them.
By the way, I sent an email to the media relations director at Vanderbilt, knowing that he probably got inundated with all sorts of different requests for Clark Lee. But I did mention that I did see 12 players from the state of Texas on their roster.
Yeah, they got good contributions from guys like Stowers and Alexander, which was what I was getting at there on the Vanderbilt roster. So, yeah, they got pretty deep run there.
Yeah, from the guys from the state of Texas as well. All right. Gentry, thanks for your time. How much do you think it's just nice that when people say back in the day it was Northwestern or K-State or lately KU, but not last year, maybe again, I don't know. But it's like, they'll beat Vanderbilt. That is off the table. I don't know what they're going to do the rest of the year, but they're no longer the butt of anybody's jokes.
Certainly not this season. Certainly not. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, people are kind of treating this as, the historic lifetime achievement kind of thing for Vanderbilt. And look, you beat the number 1 team in the country. They'd never beaten a top 5 team before, so that's understandable. But I think you kind of see this is a pretty good team. I mean, Texas has to come in the stadium in a few weeks. Tennessee has to play Vanderbilt. I mean, we'll see what happens here. This could go one of two ways. Vanderbilt could take their foot off the gas. They go to Kentucky next. They can take that's certainly a tough game. They can take their foot off the gas and not play well, and all of a sudden they lose all momentum. Or this could be the kind of thing where you got an entire program that's been told repeatedly how they shouldn't be able to do these things. I mean, you just go beat the number 1 team in the country, and anything seems possible. So we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, Gentry, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Gentry Estes from the Tennessean, columnist on the weekend it was in Nashville. First time, as he mentioned, with all of the glitz and the glamour, the bright lights, and all the events that they host, including NFL and much more, that Vanderbilt was the topic, center stage. And the videos of them taking the goalpost right downtown. And even initially, I'm sure the police tried to stop all that. Then, when you have no chance when the police start to help you, escort you to the river to dump the goalpost, which they eventually did. And then, of course, they also retrieved it. And they're cutting that up, like we said earlier, and selling that off as a bunch of different items as well. Our college football pick'em winner. I just received confirmation from Samantha Duvall. Hold on just a second. She just sent me the confirmation that the winner is from this past week, Dave Loverood. And congratulations to Dave. You get the confirmation from Samantha, TexasBeefHouse.com, and also thanks as well to Kim Coulter for the $100 gift card to that great company.
Dave is an Illinois fan.
Illinois.
Yeah.
I did reach out to him, and I did not get exactly what city. I may not have seen his email come through. By the way, TexasBeefHouse.com with another auction coming up this week on the 11th and also the 12th.
By the way, Craig Smoak is tied for first overall.
I was going to try to overlook that part.
Overall. Like, he's not just beating us. He's beating everybody but one guy that's tied with him.
When it comes to those who are doing it.
Like everybody, Craig is beating everybody but one guy who he's tied with now.
I guess I'll actually start trying now.
I am so mad at myself for 2 games that I picked that I was dumb, and I kept trying to convince myself. I did not like the way the week was going for UCF, and I just had a feeling that no matter what Florida has been, it still
wasn't even close.
Yeah, exactly. That was a game that and like an idiot, I had initially picked SMU to win at Louisville, and for some reason I started looking at Las Vegas.
I'll never
that was
pick
a dumb. I had both of them. That's my fault. I'm not making excuses.
I'll never pick against my man Kevin Jennings again.
Yeah, no, he's hard.
I picked that one wrong too, but I talked myself out of that. I was like, Louisville's on the road, and I don't know as much about them, and that's when you start making mistakes because SMU was far more of a known, and I should have just rocked with Kevin Jennings and momentum and all that. But
all of us, me, you, Garrett, Jack, we all missed Oklahoma State. We all picked Oklahoma State to beat West Virginia.
Well, I did not want to get.
That was a mistake.
I did not want to have wet blanket in my business.
Well, I'll just tell you, I don't relish in this. I mean, I do a little bit. But you remember when you and I picked Oklahoma State 4th?
Yep.
And, they had a horde of people wanting to hit us with those paddles?
Yep.
Yeah. You know what? I bet you right now they do shameful things to get to 4th.
Yeah, I mean, they might have a 1 in front of that 4 when all is said and done. They don't have a terribly difficult schedule down the stretch. I mean, their next game going to BYU, like they won't be favored in that game. Beyond that, they're going to be playing a bunch of teams that are similar to them. So, in theory, they could turn this around, but I just don't see what reason you'd have to believe that. Like, what Alan Bowman's going to magically become a different quarterback. Suddenly Ollie Gordon going to start rushing for 200 yards. Is he healthy? Is the O-line better? Is the defense better? Like, they've got problems all over the place. A lot of things worse than you anticipated them being. And it's just a shock how much they've struggled this season, given how much was returning. And it just goes to show you that having everything back doesn't necessarily mean you're just going to run it back and, go right back to where you were just because all the people, for the most part, outside of linemen, whatever, that they did lose, you had Ollie Gordon coming back and Alan Bowman coming back and this guy and that guy, but man alive, this is not anywhere close to the same team that we saw a year ago, for whatever reasons those are.
Craig has a 4-game lead, by the way, on Paul, and then 5 up on Jack and me, and then Garrett right behind us with 36 and 24.
Here's the thing. If Craig wasn't involved in this would be a hell of a race.
Hell of a race, yeah. It would be a hell of a race, but it's not.
Right now it's like running against Kennedy.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Someone said, Craig, what are the lottery numbers?
Oh, man.
Craig knows ball. Craig, don't pick Oklahoma.
I'm not.
And so there you are with some of the, and of course, RBH 2021. I guess I'll start trying then. What a smart ass and yet very Craig Dragon-like response. He didn't even know the standards.
But by the way, so I went through when we first started this and picked all the games for the season in case there was a week we got busy and I would have been like, oh crap, I forgot. But I've been able to go through and take off some games that have no relevance anymore. And it's kind of shocking that when I did that, you know what I put in a couple weeks from now? I put in a Vanderbilt game.
No, you have
because you have to go through if you look at them through the lens of what I picked on August 21st when I made this or whatever day it was, and then through the lens of what's happened since then. Like there's a lot of teams I'm like, well, we're not picking we're not going to pick Oklahoma State again for the rest of the year.
No.
What do you do?
And they don't have Bedlam. The only time you might want to use Vanderbilt would have been against Tennessee, and probably not, but that's changed now. Justin R. Question, will the guys replace USF Memphis if it is rescheduled by yet another oncoming hurricane.
You know what? I'm gonna go ahead and do it right now anyway.
Just in case.
Just in case.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's a good call. And, man, truly, these aren't empty words. Really, I mean, we got family down there.
Yeah,
Paul's from Florida.
That's
my
hometown right there.
Yeah, we are worried about the folks of Florida and just the whole Southeast. We know how, the Carolinas and whatnot got slammed, and there's all sorts of just chaos still ongoing from just a few days ago. So, yeah, that incoming storm looks nasty. And, trying to hope for the best here, but hope everybody's staying safe and getting the goods that they need and all that. But, yeah, best, most positive thoughts that we can possibly send out. You're receiving those from us, rest assured, because, man, we don't envy that whatsoever and know that's really hard stuff to be going through.
I sent a text to my brother Michael, his family, all of them down in that area. His daughter has one daughter in Tulsa, but all of them, my nieces, and then, my younger brother Philip and his wife Marianne are on the east side of Florida and might be okay from where they're located, but that baby's coming right down the track.
It has been replaced. Leaned into what we do.
Game? Okay.
Utah and Arizona State. Both teams are 4-1.
I love it.
Yeah, Friday night.
And that's a game, that Arizona State game. We're not done getting back. In fact, we'll do that next because Ari Temkin, Big 12 Radio Network on TuneIn Radio, he's next, and this is 365 Sports. The Baylor Club celebrating 10 years. 10 years from the time the McLean Stadium opened their doors, and during that time they also said, we're going to have the Baylor Club. What is the Baylor Club? It's a place where you can go and have fantastic meals. The chefs there are truly fantastic at what they do, and the cuisine is absolutely delicious. And then on top of that, you might want to host an event. It could be anything from rehearsal dinners, a wedding, our Academic All-Stars event every year in May. And the Baylor Club, they set us up. The customer service from their part of it is great. I mentioned the food. It's fantastic. And, sometimes you go to these events and everyone's going to get something to eat, and it takes forever just to get everybody fed. Unless they bring those plates to your table, and a lot of times that's even slower. They have that double-barrel serving line, and they do it incredibly well. And we get that banquet going on very quickly, and the food is delicious. And then on top of that, maybe you have some business meetings, networking you want to do. They have certain areas that are kind of offset from the actual where the bar is located and where the Baylor Club is located if you want to have some proposals or talk business with a client or potential customer. The Baylor Club, Mike Mosel, memberships available, celebrating 10 years this week at the Baylor Club.
Hi, I'm Mark Stewart with Bird Colgan Ford. It's that time of year, it's football season. Bird Colgan Ford is a proud supporter of the best high school football right here in Central Texas. BK Ford is proud to sell the #1 selling truck in Texas, the F-Series truck, 47 years in a row. Come see the largest showroom in Texas and experience better at Bird Colgan Ford.
Established in 2007 and independently owned, Alliance Bank Central Texas is committed to helping families and businesses meet their financial goals. From their tellers to their board of directors, they know the importance of superior service and competitive products. Customers have confidence knowing that their financial needs are in good hands. It's your bank, Alliance Bank Central Texas, with 2 Waco locations, 4721 Bosque Boulevard and 191 Archway Drive on Highway 84, and at AllianceBankTexas.com. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
It's football and tailgate season. If you want product for the grill or smoker, charcoal, seasonings, marinades, sauces, Waco Custom Marketplace is your home to help prep, cook, and enjoy your food. Tailgate must-like brisket, tri-tip, fresh-made burgers, sausage, chicken wings, and if you want steaks, call in your order and pick them up. Bacon wrap fillets or any kind of ribeyes. USDA Select, Choice, and Prime that melt in your mouth. House-made sausage and jerky. Also, Waco Custom Marketplace, a one-stop shop for tailgating, barbecue cook-offs, and family get-togethers, fundraisers with fair prices to you, the customer. A bakery with fresh baked bread and kolaches. There's cold beer, wine, and soft drinks. Serving Waco restaurants and families since 1940. A cut above the rest. Waco Custom Marketplace, open Monday through Saturday at 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco.
pizza, burgers, and Bears football. There's no place around Waco that serves them all other than Bubba's 33. Come show your green and gold and enjoy some of Waco's best food and beverages while watching your favorite team, the Bears. When real Bears fans get hungry, Bubba's 33 is the #1 spot for ice-cold drinks, hand-stretched, stone-baked pizzas, and bacon-infused burgers. Join us for indoor or patio dining. Bubba's 33, Waco's restaurant and proud supporter of Baylor Bears football. Sick 'em, Bears.
This is 365 Sports. Text us at 254-339-1122. The text line is sponsored by Riverbend Liquor and Wine, with the most extensive variety of craft beer in Waco. A hidden gem on Lakeshore Drive and 19th Street.
Ari Temkin, Big 12 Radio on TuneIn, joins us. It's going to be on mostly Mondays, either at around 3:40 or at this time at 4:25. You can see his handsome face. He's there with us and joining us on 365 Sports. Here is an Ari tweet from earlier today. This is early this morning. The AP Top 25 should just use recruiting rankings to compile their list every week because they sure aren't ranking teams based on current season resume. That was something that we brought up earlier on this show, sir.
Yeah, I mean, it's absurd. You know, just look at the
audio.
resumes of a Clemson or an Ole Miss.
Or your mic's off.
You got me? You got me? Check. No? Let's see.
Ari, unmute yourself, sir.
I think I am. I think I have unmuted. I'm seeing it.
Okay.
Hello? Check.
Why can't we hear it then?
I don't know.
Oh, so you hear him, Emery?
Yeah.
Okay, Ari, we're sorry. We have not heard you. Is it on the air then?
You got me?
All right, let's just go ahead and do this until we can figure out what's on our end. If he's on the air, let's let him go, right?
Well, yeah, but, I mean, we still need to ask him questions, so let me go find out what's going on over here.
Okay, all right.
I got you.
get back
You got
to
me?
that. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but he had that tweet from earlier, the top 25, and I think, Craig, you brought that up about the recruiting rankings is what they should just go ahead and use them.
Well, I mean, for
Or at
starters,
least at the start of the
what
year.
they're basically using is what the team did the year prior, how much of that team's coming back, and then the recruiting part of it, and that seems to be the equation of how you set those teams, because what else are you working off of, really? But it does feel like more often than not, people don't want the results to matter. They want the teams with the biggest stars or the teams in the biggest leagues to get the benefit of the doubt, or their loss to not matter as much, or their win to matter more. And that just gets really nauseating. There's a whole segment of that college football fandom that really does wish that it was just like, 6 Big Ten teams and 6 SEC teams based not on record, but based on like who the most popular is and who has the biggest stadiums and who would sell the most tickets. And I'll never relate to that. I don't know why that segment has spawned so much. But that's the one that you hear that's the loudest to, allowing a chance for a Boise to get into a playoff and go play or even host a playoff game, or an Iowa State, or even, God forbid, a couple of teams from the Big 12 having an opportunity, because they earned it on the field. No, let's do it because Tennessee had a higher ranked recruiting class. So they have better talent. So they're the only ones on paper that can, run the gamut. That's kind of the talk that I hear and come across sometimes. And I guess that looks cool when you got big old SEC goggles on, but for everybody else that looks outside of just 1 or 2 leagues and looks at the total package of college football, I love that we're getting the expanded playoff and that those preseason rankings are going to be able to just hold intact a cabal of the same teams with very little entry allowed, except for teams that are like them, with the exception of once in a blue moon, a Cincinnati being able to crack through there and break down that door. That door is broken down now, and there's going to be a lot of people with opportunity, and I think that's great.
All right, I don't know what the deal was on the video link, but we have Ari Temkin now on the phone. We have him on video. That's good. I wanted to see him. Handsome dude. Ari, let's go back to the rankings, and then we will circle around to some questions about the Big 12. But just overall, your thoughts. I saw your tweet. I mentioned it. We didn't get to hear your answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's absurd.
No, I'm calling him. Tell him I'm calling him.
Oh,
No?
God.
No?
Oh, all right. Okay. We'll get on the phone with him. Not sure what happened there. Sorry about that, fellas and ladies, and appreciate those of you, by the way, in the chat. And I know this sounds a little silly with the timing, but if you have not hit the like button, please do, unless you want to unlike it. Ari joins us on 365 Sports, and for the third time, your thoughts about the top 25, especially early in the year, and just using the recruiting rankings.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, look at these resumes for these teams. How on earth can you be ranking them where they are? I mean, Clemson's resume is ridiculously bad. How are they a top 10 team? It's as if they get a birthright that gives them the top 10 ranking no matter what. I mean, BYU beat arguably the best team in the ACC and held them without a touchdown. They haven't lost yet. Same too with Iowa State, who beat Iowa in the non-conference. They haven't lost yet either. How are they ranked behind two one-loss teams in Ole Miss and Clemson? Ole Miss lost at home to Kentucky. I mean, it's almost as if the AP says only Big Ten or SEC teams can be ranked inside the top 10. It doesn't make any sense. And here's the thing, too, guys. It matters. The AP Top 25 ranking matters because while it's not a complete analog to the college football playoff rankings, they absolutely use it as a data point to rank their teams once they start ranking teams in early November. So, I mean, I thought Missouri was foolish to be ranked number 9 last week. Obviously, they get housed by Texas A&M. I wasn't sure A&M should have been ranked 25th based on the resume. I mean, I get why we do the preseason rankings, but I feel like a lot of these writers are just completely lazy in how they lay this thing out for the AP Top 25 by not looking at resumes. You're just looking at the logo for BYU and ranking them 14th, despite the fact that they're 5-0 and have really good wins. Kansas State and SMU, to name two of them, they have the number 1 strength of schedule. Texas Tech has won 4 games. They're the only team in the country, Texas Tech, that has won 4 games this year against plus 500 teams right now. 4 wins against plus 500 teams right now. How are they not in the top 25? It is absurd. I even think Pitt is probably lower than it should be at 22. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of it seems like has to do more with recruiting rankings than it does what you've done in an actual season, because there's no way that Clemson or Ole Miss, for that matter, should be in the top 10. And by the way, Alabama losing at Vanderbilt probably should have dropped them more than the 6 spots they dropped.
Ole Miss, not only you mentioned that, they moved 3 points. They moved back in 3. They went back into the top 10 for what they've done. But go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, Ari, the Big 12 continues to be chaotic, except everywhere but in Provo and in Ames, and particularly with Iowa State. They didn't play their best early against Baylor. Baylor was right in the game. And then the minute that Baylor started to kind of lose their grip, Iowa State just ripped it away, like completely, to where they took away any momentum they had. What is it particularly about this Matt Campbell team that allows them to do that?
Yeah, I mean, though Baylor scored coming out of half, I think the punt return for touchdown, because Baylor was really in control of this game. It was 14-3, and then, you just can't give them extra points. To answer your question, Paul, it's the offense that they have. I mean, we've seen them have good offenses. I mean, Brock Purdy, look what he's doing in the NFL, and we saw times with him and the running game with Breece Hall. But we've never seen kind of the full complement of what they have, whether it be Higgins on the outside, Noel from the slot, the stable of running backs. We saw in this game, the emergence of Johnson in a way that we haven't seen. We've been expecting it from Abu Samba. So I just think they have such a lot more upside from an offensive perspective than what we're used to. Rocco Beck has become really, really good and consistent. And they're just, even if they are slow out of the gates, like they've been in multiple games this year, they tend to figure out what defenses are doing to them over the course of 4 quarters, and they really start to lift off. And we saw that in this game. I mean, again, I thought even though Baylor got that touchdown coming out of the break to go back ahead, it just felt like Baylor had their opportunity to knock them out, and they didn't do it. And Iowa State's offense was none the wiser with how they finished this game with, touchdown, field goal, whatever it was. You just can't have empty possessions, and I thought there were too many early on for Baylor where they really could have taken control of that game, and then late just because they have so much offensive firepower.
Texas Tech started off with a nearly disastrous opener. Were able to pull that shootout out against Abilene Christian, got beat up good by Washington State, but since then they've just grinded out wins, man. Like, they play so hard, Ari. The culture seems like it's thriving there in Lubbock, and that leads to wins like Saturday night where you got up big on the road late at night, you give away the lead, but you fight back, you grab it back, and you seal that game. I was just thoroughly impressed by the effort, not to mention the talent as well. But your thoughts on a Texas Tech team that's, sitting there and just winning games week by week and getting the job done?
Yeah, this was a really impressive win for Tech for the reason that they were up big in the first half and then couldn't do anything offensively in the second half. They were up 18-3 at halftime, ended up, I think, towards the end of the third quarter being up 18-6. So kind of both teams struggled, and I thought, credit Texas Tech defense for what they were able to do against Fafita. But when Arizona came back and then took a lead, it just felt at that point like, this can be hard for Texas Tech to be able to overcome. Arizona defensively has figured some stuff out. They had 2 fumbles on Taj Brooks. How rare do you see that? You never see Brooks fumble once, let alone twice. And, to be able to overcome that within the game and then still win the game when your offense, there was at one point, I think, in the fourth quarter, with about 7 minutes left, they had 34 total yards in the second half. And so, a lot of times we see teams where they build that lead and then another team gives them a haymaker and they can't overcome that. And I it says a lot about Texas Tech. They're able to do that. The other thing about Tech is they lost to Washington State in a game that Taj Brooks didn't play. And we're starting to see one of the best defensive players in this conference emerge, which is Jacob Rodriguez. This guy was an absolute monster. My guess is he's going to be named Defensive Player of the Week in the Big 12 because he was a beast in this game. He forced a fumble. He pushed a ball out. He was all over the field, 13 tackles. Jacob Rodriguez for Texas Tech is just an absolute beast. And, this is as full of a team win as we've seen for Texas Tech in a long time. This is a team that I think 3 weeks in, we weren't really sure what to make of it and thought, okay, here we go again with Joey McGuire. But now they look like a team that's certainly, firmly in the upper tier of the Big 12 right now.
Who is reeling more? UCF, Kansas, TCU, and we can discuss Baylor as another part of another question. But and Oklahoma State? Think about that, Ari. I know TCU won a couple of weeks ago, but these teams all seem to be like, what in the hell's going on?
Yeah, to me, there's 2 that stand out. One would be Oklahoma State because, West Virginia winning at Oklahoma State was my underdog pick of the week. I've not been right a lot this year, but, man, that one was obvious. The thing that made Oklahoma State good last year wasn't Alan Bowman, and it wasn't even their defense. It was Ollie Gordon and Colin Oliver. Statistically, defensively, they were bad last year, but they were very much bend but don't break, and then they'd get big plays because of a guy like Colin Oliver who would just create splash plays on defense, would create turnovers, would sack the quarterback, put him behind the chains. And then on the other end, Ollie Gordon. His running ability made it so easy for Alan Bowman to operate. So when you remove both of those guys from the equation, Gordon not being effective at all and Colin Oliver being out basically since week 2, it shouldn't be a surprise what we're seeing right now. Alan Bowman has been so ineffective, and the problem is we've seen what's behind him in Garrett Rangel, and it's not much better. And I guess at this point, Zane Flores, who was, fairly highly recruited, either he's not ready or what. But at this point, it's hard not to look down your bench and say, what else can I get? Because, without Gordon being effective, you just see how ineffective Alan Bowman is at quarterback. It's not like he got worse from last year. I just think the offense around him is worse, and that's made it a lot more difficult on him. And then on the defense end, this is the same defense we saw last year from a statistical standpoint. They gave up a ton of yards. They were really at the bottom of the Big 12 and around the country, in terms of yards per game, in terms of, a lot of the defensive metrics. But it was Colin Oliver that just was so disruptive. So I think you remove those guys, and it's kind of obvious what you're seeing right now. Not a very good football team at all. I think a lot of people expected them to bounce back this past week and not fall to 0-3 in Big 12 play. But, with the Mike Gundy effect, but I don't see it, and I didn't see it going into that game. The other one is UCF. It's been 2 brutal weeks with UCF after it looked like they were going to be one of the elite teams of the Big 12 because of their running game. And now we hear there's 5 players who are going to, or 6 players, including their kicker, who are, basically taking a red shirt to transfer out. One of those is Xavier Townsend, another guy that was a, Swiss Army knife of sorts for Gus Malzahn to use. So suddenly there's something happening beneath the surface here at UCF that's maybe a little bit more than we can tell. It's certainly losing 6 guys in the middle of the season that say we're going to redshirt and then potentially leave the program. That says a lot. This was a elite running game with Penny Boone, with R.J. Harvey, with Townsend, with everything that they had. And the last 2 weeks, they've been brutally bad. And it reflects on KJ Jefferson. Jefferson is not a very good quarterback. He's much better when he's got when the team is running at 5, 6, 7 yards a carry. This week they were at 108 yards total over their carries, 2.7 per carry. Like that is not a recipe for UCF to be successful. So certainly, like, those are two teams where, when you ask who's reeling the most right now, I would say them. I mean, my Jayhawks, probably the worst team right now in the Big 12, but I've never been more optimistic about them this season because Jalen Daniels actually played well on Saturday. It was their defense that just couldn't get stopped. There were 5 consecutive touchdown drives at the end of that game, and unfortunate for Kansas, Arizona State was the one with the ball last. Their defense was probably gassed. I mean, both teams were playing in those conditions. I'm not trying to, say it was tougher on Kansas than it was in Arizona State, but they were gassed in that 100-degree heat they were playing at Arizona State. So I guess I'm more optimistic about my Jayhawks simply because I have been waiting to see Jalen Daniels play better, and this was as good of a game as he's played all year.
I'm going to throw this theory at you, Ari, because it applies to the Big 12 in particular. Seventh-year quarterbacks are not a good thing.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, obviously, if you're good enough, you're probably not going to last 7 years. And I think Utah is in pretty good shape with Cam Rising. So that's one. Like, Cam Rising is just a better quarterback than most of these guys. I mean, Bowman just hasn't been a good quarterback. It was aided last year by Ollie Gordon and then Brennan Presley. I mean, it was basically those two guys that stole the show for Oklahoma State last year. So everything's regressed. So, I mean, look, I think, Paul, you're not completely wrong because, look, there's a reason. If guys are staying that long in college, there's a reason for it. If you're good enough, usually you can move on to the NFL. But we've also seen guys have a lot of success, being 6, 7-year quarterbacks as well. So I think it makes you obviously more experienced. And plus, it also matters how many years you've been within the same system. It obviously matters what's around you. But, yeah, a lot of times if you've been there for 7 years, there's a reason why you haven't moved on to the next level.
So that Houston-TCU game on Friday night was super interesting, not only because of the results. Houston gets a Big 12 win that I don't think anybody was really expecting, but we got to see Zion Chris before he got hurt. Donovan Smith able to close that game out. They play good defense. It's a rough up and down year, but still a very promising year in year one for Houston. On the other side of this, TCU, which had a lot of promise coming in, no run game, bad defense, and Josh Hoover's great, but he turns the ball over too much. I was just gobsmacked by that result. I wasn't expecting that, Ari. I don't know about you, but how much of a concern do you have about TCU, not just as a football team, but kind of as a program right now? It just feels like something is very off within the walls there in Fort Worth, or am I missing something?
No, I think you're 100% right, Craig. I mean, I think, there are a lot of things I've read and seen now coming out of Fort Worth that are wondering, how much leeway does a berth and a berth and then a win in the college football playoff get you for Sonny Dykes? Because you would expect this team to be a lot better than it is, and it's the consistency. I mean, Houston and TCU are like the epitome of inconsistent at this point in time, and so I think we thought maybe TCU was figuring some stuff out. They beat Kansas in an impressive win, and then completely lay an egg. It's twofold for me. So let's start with Houston. I thought we were going to see Zion Chris in the game of the week before against Iowa State. And maybe Willie Fritz was a little worried about throwing him to the Wolves against an Iowa State defense. But, I mean, you had back-to-back games where you didn't score and you were shut out. Zion Chris gives you a much better, running threat than Donovan Smith does at this point of his career. And I just, at this point, don't care about the upside Donovan may give you in the passing game. So I'm surprised it kind of took Willie Fritz as long as it did to get to Zion Chris because he's just obviously the better option at this point in time, and I think has been the last couple of weeks. Donovan Smith, we talk about those 7-year quarterbacks or whatever he is, 6-year quarterbacks. We've seen already the best, I think, of Donovan Smith, and the worst is certainly in front of him. So, I think everybody's surprised to see Chris. And then, this is a team that was shut out in back-to-back weeks. I mean, they barely scored 30 points all year. They did in one game, but beyond that, it's been tough for them to score. So the fact that they got so many points in the first half probably threw TCU for a loop in that one. The other part to this I'll say is with TCU, with regards to TCU, I wish, and this probably isn't Sonny Dykes' fault, but, I talk about this with Lance Leipold in Kansas, and that is, when Leipold came in, they were switching from a 3-man front to more of a 4-man front. And, they really had to upgrade their personnel to do so. I mean, we know that, right? You're going to need different body styles, different body types of players along your defensive line when you're running an odd man front versus an even man front. So I think TCU is transitioning right now from more of a 3-man front they were running under Joe Gillespie to that 4-man traditional under Andy Avalos. And I like the fact that we expected them to be, or I say we, but it seems like the expectations are much higher for them without sort of understanding defensively that this was going to be a year in transition, especially when you understand that they lost their best interior defensive lineman to the portal this year, in Williams. So in some ways I'm not surprised because it does take time to transition from that odd man to that even man front personnel wise. I think Sonny felt like maybe they had a little bit better personnel up front than they do coming into this season, but it's just you got to have a little bit of patience in terms of turning over rosters and having a completely new defensive scheme. And then when it comes to Hoover, it's funny because I think it was either going to the Kansas game or the week before where he had not thrown an interception the entire season. He'd put up some big numbers, had gone a really long stretch without throwing a pick, and now it's like he can't turn it off. Now all he's doing is throwing picks. But I mean, it certainly doesn't help when you can't run the football. And so it's like they can't play defense, they can't run the football. How good are you going to be?
Ari, Baylor the week before against BYU was down 28-7. Then they put on this surge in the second half, but eventually still had 3 possessions, couldn't close the deal. They open up 14-3 at Iowa State and look good doing it. There's a note here. The teams they've lost to this year are combined 18-2. The teams they have left on their schedule are under 500. Are you surprised, or your thoughts about, and we have our opinion, obviously we cover them, on Dave Aranda and the hot seat and his future?
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like there's very little he can do at this point in time based on their current record to save his job. Maybe I'm wrong. But, I mean, also, we just talked about this with TCU. If you can't play defense, if you can't run the football, how good are you going to be?
Yep.
I mean, they're putting this all on Sawyer Robertson. I mean, he was one of my players of the week this week. But, I mean, how many times did he throw the football? The whole deal is built on him. So, I mean, I see the schedule opening up to your point, and there's maybe some reason for optimism there, but you got to be able to run the football. Without Sawyer Robertson, it's putting so much on him. And when you consider that coming into the season, we thought this was DeQuan Finn's team, and now here we are, week 6, heading into week 7, and it's all Sawyer Robertson. It's just really tough. I mean, look, they've got pieces. I mean, Hal Presley's been impressive. I think I thought coming into the year they'd have a really good receiving core. But I mean, defensively they've got to figure some stuff out, and then they got to get their running game going. Maybe they do against lesser opponents, but it's just so tough to win when your quarterback is throwing 40, 50, 60 times a game and you can't run the football. And that's been what Baylor's been the last few weeks, certainly.
And if you then all of a sudden have 1 or 2 things going well, you get a punt blocked. I mean, completely unblocked. A punt block. The field goal you missed at the end, near the end, that could have sewn up the Colorado game. That's what losing teams do, man. That's what they do. Ari Temkin with us, Big 12 Radio, on TuneIn Radio with us on 365 Sports.
So, Ari, how much is Iowa State, BYU front runners right now based on record. Colorado looks like they're doing something. Where do you put Utah in all this, given the uncertainty around how badly Cam Rising's fingers hurt?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point, until we see it, we have to expect that he's not going to play, right? I mean, how can we, given the history here? And then not only that, but if he does come back, or when he comes back, can he stay healthy? Can he stay on the field? Right? It's not just a matter of getting back and getting on the field. It's, okay, this guy missed an entire year. He comes back and he gets hurt again, cutting his hand, because he just, you don't want to rein it in. You want this guy to be the full version of himself, because, you're not getting the full picture of it if he's not. But at the same time, like, he's not proven he can stay healthy. And, obviously Isaac Wilson has looked good at times, but he's still a true freshman, and he's, what's your upside with a true freshman versus a guy like Cameron Rising that just has a lot more upside? We talked last week about Utah could potentially be the team that gets the second bid to the Big 12, but that doesn't work unless Cam Rising comes back and is back for the rest of the year. because then you have a built-in excuse if you're Utah that says, hey, we've got a loss here, but you know what? That loss was when we didn't have Cam Rising and we went 2-1 during that stretch. So, it's hard to judge Utah at this point because they're the best team in the Big 12 when Cam Rising's healthy. But it's a big when because we haven't seen him back yet, and we keep hearing noise about when he's coming back. I would expect him to be back this Saturday based on what we heard before. But again, we heard last year that he'd be back and never came back. So who knows? And then again, once he comes back, is it a ticking time bomb before he's hurt again? I hate to say that, but at this point, we can go off of only the things that we've seen, and that's what we've seen.
So, Ari, 5 games this week. 4 of the 5 games have a ranked team in them. They're all national TV, which is great, including a couple of Saturday night games with Iowa State, West Virginia, and then Kansas State, Colorado. What game are you kind of eyeing the most this week?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I had the list in front of me here. Let me try and pull it up again.
K-State, Colorado, Iowa State, West Virginia, Arizona, BYU, Cincy, UCF, and Friday night gets it started, Utah at Arizona State.
Yeah, so, it's the night games for me, the 3 of them, the Friday night game and then the 2 on Saturday. The biggest one, though, is Iowa State, West Virginia. West Virginia is obviously 3-2, but they're sneaky because they're 2-0 in the Big 12 now and just had that resounding win on the road against Oklahoma State. Now they get Iowa State and Kansas State in back-to-back weeks at home. So, this is a huge game for them. We saw Nico Marchiol came into that game. He was highly recruited at quarterback. He's been there for a few years. He didn't miss a beat when Garrett Green got hurt. I'd love to see more of him because I think he just gives you a lot more upside, from a passing standpoint. Green is just so inconsistent. His completion percentage is so low, and it was the case last year. You thought, well, maybe that will change this year, but at least right now, it doesn't look like it. And I love Marchiol, but they've got a robust running game. They ran basically 8 yards a carry against Oklahoma State, whether it's Jaheim White or C.J. Donaldson, plus the quarterback. They've just got a lot there. And then I think defensively, they've improved dramatically over the start of their season where they were really hemorrhaging yards, especially through the air. So West Virginians are extremely underrated, and I'm not just saying that because I picked them to win the Big 12 this year. But the fact that they're 2-0 very sneakily after losing 2 games in the non-conference, this is a big stretch here for them where they could, if they knocked off Iowa State and Kansas State in consecutive weeks at home, now all of a sudden they're in the driver's seat. With that being said, though, I think they at least win one of these 2 against Iowa State or Kansas State. If they win both of them, it'd be a miracle, but I think they definitely get one. And then, Colorado, it's funny because you had 3 of the 4 ranked teams in the Big 12 on a bye last week, and then not to mention Colorado that's unranked, but is coming off its most impressive win against UCF, where it was able to run the ball effectively and protect Shedeur Sanders. So, if they can keep that up, then they're a team to be reckoned with because they've got arguably the best quarterback in the conference in Shedeur Sanders, and their defense is very salty. It's very underrated. I love what their new defensive coordinators come in to do and has really turned this thing around. They've got some players, but, last year, if you remember, they could not block anybody on offense, and they could not do anything defensively to get stops. They're definitely stopping people right now on defense. In terms of their offensive line, we obviously saw them get sacked 8 times against Baylor in that game. The sack numbers were down against UCF, and I think that was a big reason why they were so effective. But it kind of remains to be seen how good that offensive line truly is, or better it is. But if it is improved with that improved defense, Colorado is definitely a team that can win this conference.
Craig, what were you going to make a comment about with BYU?
No, I was just going to mention big noon kickoffs at BYU this weekend for Arizona. So that's ought to be a nice setting. Hopefully they fare better than the last Big 12 host, UCF, in their big noon kickoff showcase.
Yeah, I think that, UCF had a massive crowd. BYU will pack that area up. That'll be hellacious to see. Ari, it's kind of fun. We're starting to see things take shape, and yet again, we still don't know exactly about a lot of these teams because they're going to start beating each other up. I love it. I think the Big 12 is so entertaining, not because we cover it, but because it is. And I just asked everyone in the chat, give me your top 5 right now, and I guarantee you it's not just real simple to name it off. It's just it would take some time to, well, wait a minute, what about them? Thanks, buddy. Sorry about the technical issues on the video. We'll figure that out for you next Monday, and thank you for your time. Good luck tomorrow with your show and the rest of the week.
Appreciate you, Smokey. Take care, guys. And, I think if you asked 100 people to rank the top 5 teams in the Big 12 right now, you get 100 different answers.
Incredible. I think so. I really do. I think you'll get so many combinations like a Rubik's Cube. That's Ari Temkin every morning Big 12 radio on TuneIn Radio. Here, for example, and I know we got Phil Bennett around the corner, Kyle, his top 5, BYU, Utah, Iowa State, West Virginia, and then he said, oh, my God, one more team. Here's
that's the problem. Like 5 on is pretty much a crapshoot.
Yeah, it is. This is from UT Parking, Iowa State, BYU, Kansas State, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. Kim said, Kim, you're not telling the truth. Iowa State, K-State, BYU, West Virginia, and Houston. Kim is not allowing us to put Texas Tech too high on the pedestal.
I'm starting the hype train.
Yep, I am too.
He wants to keep him humble, so that Joey can say you've got doubters all over the place.
Smokey, this is from Bracket Cat, BYU, Iowa State, Texas Tech, Kansas State, and if Rising comes back, then Utah, otherwise maybe West Virginia, and there's just more and more and more of these along the way.
If Colorado wins this weekend,
woo!
That'd be beat K-State at home in Boulder. That'd be a pretty massive win. But yeah, I think we need just more evidence to really split the teams, because if you want to go with BYU, like BYU's had the most impressive resume I think so far, with beating an SMU and being the big loss there for the Mustangs, and just the way they've kind of taken care of their business, they've been a pleasant surprise. But Colorado is sitting right there as well. Like, they lost to Nebraska, but that was in Lincoln. Like, that was week 2 of the season, and they're still handling their business. Utah, they haven't been full strength. If they get Cam Rising back, I know that's the big if every week, but if they get him back, that's the big key there. And, you just go on and on and on. But, yeah, I think there's 4 or 5 teams right at that top where there's very little separation, and they're all going to play each other for the most part. We're going to get a good number of combinations and weed out some of it. But it could also just be massive carnage where everybody beats up everybody, which was kind of an expectation for the Big 12 this year, was that could be the case because everybody's so equally matched. So it makes for unpredictable weeks. But it also means a lot of teams with 2 or 3 losses, and that might hurt you in the playoff. But not everything needs to live and die by the playoff.
Yeah.
I'd rather see a fun, competitive league than be sitting there all year long well, I want Colorado to win so that the Big 12 can get 2. No, I'm not going to watch college football like that. I want to see the best games, and if that means that everybody's got 2 or 3 losses, then so damn be it. But if it can work out both ways, that would be terrific. And there's a couple of teams that, if they were to get through these last few weeks, that you could see a scenario where maybe you do get a couple of teams in. But yeah, it's chaos for certain, and it's anybody's guess as to what the road to Arlington eventually does look like.
No, it's
you can eliminate some teams though, like no Baylor. Houston's not going to be there, even though they've got some promise. Obviously, TCU's not going to be making their way there based on what we've seen. Oklahoma State's not going to make their way there. Kansas isn't going to make their way there. I mean, there's still technically enough time, but that's pretty easy to say right now.
You could eliminate about at least a third of the league. And then there's that middle section that will start getting beat up amongst you. I look forward to it. I'm not going to watch college football and worry about, okay, what does this mean for the playoff? Not yet. I know that's a week-to-week thing. In fact, we'd put up the projection. We'll do that occasionally, but I'm just going to watch the games and enjoy like we did last weekend with Arkansas Vanderbilt having huge wins. When we come back, Phil Bennett, his thoughts about what we saw from the weekend. This is 365 Sports. TexasBeefHouse.com. They're having yet another live auction coming up on the 11th and 12th of this week. So it's a Friday, Saturday auction, a little bit different. Usually it's in the middle of the week. This week is Friday and Saturday, 6 a.m. until just after 6 o'clock on Saturday. It will end when some of the bidding finally ceases. Like, I've been involved in that, where I had what I thought was going to be some Wagyu steaks, and the next thing you know, I kind of turned my attention towards the show, and then I lost out on that. So TexasBeefHouse.com. Go to Bid on Beef as well and find out what they have available when it comes to the beef product. And also, if you use 365 Sports, you get $25 off your first order of $100. You get $25 off of that particular order. Now, TexasBeefHouse.com, the Duvall family, what they do, they have been working on making sure that their ranch, the Angus cattle, and what they produce when it comes to beef is as pure as it could possibly be. I have been on their ranch. I have seen how they treat and how they also take care of the animals. And as far as making sure, I even saw them one time when they were handling a bunch of deer. So that's what they do. And you can go online, TexasBeefHouse.com, Friday and Saturday, the next live online auction at TexasBeefHouse.com.
Get ready, Baylor fans. The ultimate game weekend experience awaits you at the Baylor Club. Kick off your weekend with our Friday Night Live pep rally. With live entertainment and special appearances from the Baylor Spirit Squad, it's the perfect way to start your game weekend with a roar. On Saturdays, don't miss our Knox Hall tailgate. Enjoy delicious food, ice-cold drinks, and great company as you gear up for the big game. And after the weekend's excitement, wrap it all up with our famous Bear brunches on Sundays. Don't wait. Make your game weekends legendary with the Baylor Club membership today.
There are 26 letters in the alphabet, over 600,000 words in the dictionary, and just 3 of them said together can change everything. Let's order pizza. Those 3 words lead to dough made from scratch and 3 fresh signature cheeses that blanket golden crust in a heavenly melt on Marco's Pizza that'll blow your mind. So visit Marcos.com to order and stop by Marco's Pizza in Belmead, China Spring, Woodway, and in Robinson. Marco's. Pizza lovers get it.
With so many companies and policies out there, it gets so confusing shopping for insurance, and I never know if I'm getting the policy that's right for me. Luckily, I met the team at the Niche Group Insurance Agency. With the Niche Group, you can go to one company and get access to coverage options from many insurance carriers, and you get to speak to a real person about your specific coverage needs. With the Niche Group, I know I'm getting the right coverage at the right price. If you need insurance, talk to the experts at the Niche Group at 1-800-258-8302.
TFNB Your Bank for Life is the official local bank of Baylor Athletics. Find out why more Central Texas are making TFNB their bank for life. Sign up for our Edge checking and savings accounts to earn interest or cash back. With 5 convenient locations and an award-winning mobile app, banking has never been easier. TFNB Your Bank for Life. Member FDIC.
This is 365 Sports.
The Sikkim 365 app is brought to you by Allen Samuels Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram Fiat. Come by, let's be friends.
Bill Bennett, long-time college football coach with us on Mondays in the 5 o'clock hour. And what a weekend. Chaos in college football, and I want to see more of it coming up week after week. Phil, there was an article that I was reading, and in the end, they looked at what happened over the weekend. Was this an exception? You always had 1 or 2 of these each year, but could this be more consistent? And the article also said there are no great teams in college football any longer. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think we're seeing the product of the portal, coaches, getting different teams in there. I don't think the continuity is what it's been in the past. I do. I believe and I think there's going to be more. I think it's going to be really interesting. They talk about adding teams, 12 teams. It might be harder than ever to pick those top 12 teams.
Phil, it is free agency without the rules that the NFL has. So in order to get kind of a dynasty going again, they're going to have to reestablish some rules, right?
Paul, I think the whole thing has got, and I think Charlie Baker, the NCAA guy, brought it up when the UNLV coach quarterback left. There's got to be a referendum of saying, hey, this is what we're going to allow. This is what we're not. Now, I think today, they approved the payment of player. It was a big day. And hopefully the NCAA, the coaches can get together, get the calendar right, and make this a one-time thing. Right now there's too many portal openings. You have spring, you have summer, one time. If you're leaving, leave, and then go.
Coach, 5 top 15 upsets. Vanderbilt beating Alabama, Arkansas beating Tennessee, A&M beating Missouri, Washington beat Michigan, and Minnesota beat USC. Which one of those jumped off the page the most to you on Saturday?
To me, obviously, the Alabama game. It was just ironic. Of course, we all know we've had those moments. I wish I'd never said that. I'm sure Nick was thinking that when they were playing that on the scoreboard, as they were saying, he goes, every place in the SEC's tough except Vanderbilt. Not a hard place to play. People don't realize that, but their stadium is under construction, and I believe, I could be wrong, but I think there was only a 28,000 person seating in that stadium on Saturday for that game. Though millions saw it on television, not many of them saw it live.
Well, in Arkansas, Sam Pittman, as Craig brought up, got a heck of a win against Tennessee. You obviously reside at Texas A&M University's backyard. I thought that was a team I had not seen. They've won some games, but I haven't seen them that efficient and dominant in a game like that. And maybe Missouri, well, not maybe, overrated too, but I thought that was not flawless, but one of the best wins at A&M in a long time.
Absolutely correct. I sat in a box on the east side 50-yard line and watched every snap, and I thought both sides of the ball, the kicking game, I thought it was the best game I've seen in probably the last 6 or 7 years. I thought a couple of years ago the LSU game at home was a good game that we won. But, yes, it's like I told someone now they've got two quarterbacks that they know can win. And not many teams have that, David. And, to have the young man come back who didn't play great versus Notre Dame and play as well as he did, and then get their running game going, it was impressive. Missouri had some chances. I don't know if you watched the game, but Missouri decided to go for it on 4th and 2 at A&M's 40-yard line on the first drive, and they had a terrible interference. And they threw the flag, and then they picked them up, and then A&M went down and just made them pay the rest of the game. I think they scored 7 straight drives. It was impressive.
To A&M, you coached with R.C. Slocum, and he was the most successful coach that A&M's ever had consistently for a long haul. They had pockets here and there, and you know the history very well because you're an Aggie, but he was, for the longest term, the most successful. And the one thing that's always jumped out to me about RC compared to some of the coaches they've had after RC is that he's a no-frills coach. He's no nonsense. It's just about the ball and coaching and building the program. And maybe A&M's personality skewed away from that when they went in the SEC. And Mike Elko seems to be more like RC than anybody they've had in that time since. Am I right there?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt you're right. The only other guy that would probably fit in that would have been Mike Sherman. Mm-hmm. Mike Sherman was a ball coach. And just that fateful day that Texas, that kicked that field goal. But, yeah, I would agree with that. And one of the things that was impressive to me on Saturday, I watched Mike Elko on the sideline. I know him a little bit. I don't know him well. But he really did a nice job of letting the coaches coach, and he managed the game. They went for it a couple of 4th downs, and, there was never any indecision. It was a game, as David said, it flowed well. And, yeah, you go back to my coach, Emory Ballard. We had a nice run there when the Southwest Conference was really a powerful conference. And I think now, I think that A&M being in the SEC, of course, I've coached in the SEC. I've been there, and I've always thought it's got great teams, but it's like most leagues, Paul. It's got this upper echelon, then it's got their other people. I'll never forget Steve Spurrier telling us at Dat Wynn's induction way back in 17 in New York. He told this other A&M guy and myself, he said, I really like A&M. I've always thought it was a good place. He said, but I'll just be honest with you. He said, they'll be vying with Arkansas and Ole Miss and those guys, trying to get seventh place. They're not a blue blood. And you know what? Truthfully, that's what people see.
You got to coach in an Oklahoma-Texas game when you were on the OU staff back in the late 90s. Big game this week. Texas, #1 team in the country. Both teams are coming off bye weeks. It seems like Oklahoma's made the pivot at quarterback for the better, although how much better remains to be seen. Just your thoughts on the Red River and where it kind of stacks up amongst the big games in the sport, but also your thoughts on what these two teams are looking at come this weekend.
Craig, I've been fortunate. I was so fortunate. I played I started my career in the A&M Texas game. And we even played LSU back then in the early 70s. We had a nice rivalry with them. And then, I've been involved with the Pittsburgh, West Virginia, Indiana, Purdue, the old bucket. People don't realize of all the games, the most drama and pageantry I've ever seen, and I'm talking about just a hatred, is the Texas OU game. I mean, it is, it's one side's crimson, one side's orange, and I mean, it's very, nobody else does it, I don't think. It's split right down the middle. And I'm talking, you see fights going into the stadium, and when you're coming out, they're fighting. I mean, it is during the state fair, it is a electric atmosphere. And Friday night before the game, I mean, Dallas is rocking. So, I know there's other great games. I would think Michigan, Ohio State, and Alabama and Auburn. But I'm telling you, that's a game that would be hard to match.
When I was in television early, I covered that game a lot on TV and was on the sidelines with a camera. And one time I just sat in the end zone and just looked up and took it in. And it is truly, and anyone who's been there, and you see it a little bit on TV, 50-50 split. It is absolutely phenomenal the way that they set that up. All right, 800-pound gorilla. Baylor up 14-3 on the road in Ames against a really good football team that didn't blink like a Utah or others, and they just kept doing what they do and eventually just bludgeoned the defense. Phil, what's going on, you think? What do you think is the honest thought about Dave Aranda? Can he save his job this year?
I have a dear friend of mine that everybody knows. You would know him. I'm not going to give his name. Former head coach, college. I asked him last week, I said, watch the Baylor-Iowa State game. Tell me your thoughts. I said, they've been close, but it's been no cigar. I said, they've let, since the Colorado game, it's just sort of been hit and miss. And so Sunday morning, yesterday, I called him. And the first thing out of his mouth, he says, they're a team that has some good players, but he said, I don't see many difference makers. Mm-hmm. He said, they're a team that almost has to play perfect to win. And he said, we don't have enough playmakers to make up for our mistakes. And the more I thought about it, he's absolutely right.
Dead on right.
I mean, we don't, on both sides of the ball, we don't have enough playmakers that make us a winning team. And that's what kept us from winning that game Saturday. I thought when number 5 intercepted the ball before halftime on a bad throw by their quarterback, I said, this is the momentum that Baylor needed. And it wasn't. And as you said, they just kept getting stronger. And, well, where were our other running backs? The Reed kid.
Yep.
Is there something going on there?
Well, he's been out. They haven't really, even though they have a bunch of names, none of them have all been healthy at one time. Dominic Richardson out. Bryson Washington missed the first part of the year. Of course, he took a shot on that awkward collision.
I think it's a combination of availability and just like they can't run the football.
You're not going to win a game when someone has 270 yards rushing. I think both the top backs that got 100 yards averaged over 6.5 yards a carry.
Mm-hmm.
That's tough. And as you said, they stayed with the game plan, and they had more playmakers. And as my guy said, he said, you watch it, And early in the game, I think we all would say this, Baylor played hard. Sawyer came out and did some things, kept some things. We had a couple of good receiving yards, made some plays, but eventually it phased out. And there was no doubt in the fourth quarter, by the time that game, as he said, had evolved to the fourth quarter, it was an ass kicker.
Yeah, yeah. It could have gotten worse. Let me ask you a question. If you don't mind.
It went from like, hey, you expected to lose that game on the road, top 15 team, but at least it's respectable to like, oh, wow, you got your butts kicked. That was a whooping, and now you feel even worse for it somehow.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's very well put, because that's exactly the way I felt. I said, wow, I thought this thing, you think before halftime, and that's why there's 4 quarters, and that's why good teams that have the playmakers, like Iowa State did, they keep playing, and eventually their athleticism and their ability shows up. And this is what my friend told me. He said, it teams like Baylor, I mean, and this is a tribute and yet a knock to Dave. The tribute is he's getting them to play hard, but they're not quite good enough or consistent enough to win, unless they carry it from start to finish. And you know what? And he even said, he goes, hey, you just don't know when it's going to happen. It might, they'll beat somebody. He said they'll beat somebody because they're going to have that game that they play a whole game.
All right, I need to ask you this, and you've been on numerous staffs that have been recruited. Now, the early signing period for most of your career was not there. It was in February, which allowed transitions to happen with coaching changes. Can you, as a university or an athletic department, not make a change, or can you ever make a decision on a coach because you're worried about what might happen to the recruiting class?
Dave, that's a tough question. I think that you're talking to a guy. I got let go with 5 games to go. And you know what? I was okay with it because I told him I wanted to finish out, and we did. I mean, we kept them hard and gave them time to find out, but I'm not sure it's beneficial to do it. I don't know how much of jump it gives you on, number one, finding another coach, and number 2, recruiting. I just don't. Now, here's the thing. You look at portal, and I heard Nick Saban say it. He goes, everybody talks about who's got the number 1 portal class, who's got the number 1 recruiting class. Well, the whole thing comes down, and people forget it, is evaluation, picking the right guys. And a new coach comes in, they're not going to be blind of who the athletes are. They're going to know who they want to recruit. And regardless, I can remember when Matt Rule came in, I told Phil, I told some of those other guys, of guys we recruited, we were recruiting, Petrie being one of them, you need to stay with him. The kid, the D lineman from Cedar Park, stay with him. He's a big player. And they did, and it paid off. So I can't tell you that. And it's just, when is the best time? It's got to be an executive decision.
Okay. You have, as you said, let go 5 games left in the season. You have coached at a lot of places, had success in some places that didn't go as well. How do you go to work every day knowing that the inevitable is about to happen?
I've always said that when you're a football coach, you're renting an office. That's what you're doing. And your rent is paid by wins and losses and behavior. And I don't like the word culture, but the expectancy of your program. And when you're a professional, when you get in this, I had a guy tell me from the get-go. He said, if you're going to get in college coaching, the first thing you better understand, you can't carry your feelings on your shoulder, because you're going to be pissed off 99% of the time. And this was back now, Dave, you remember this. This was back in the day that you just had radio shows.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I mean, it wasn't like the Twitter where everybody gives their thoughts. And I think there's an amount of pride. I'm telling you, I can. One of the things I was proud of this, I mean, we played. We were about where they were at. We weren't quite good enough to win. We had lost some guys, but my last game at SMU was I think a 4 overtime game against the top 25 of Memphis, and we lost it at the very end. But you know, that becomes a personal thing of who you are, what you're made of, and I know this: Dave Aranda is not. If he is released, that staff, they're going to work their tails off to do the right thing, because you know what? They're all, you know, I've always thought this: people are looking at you more now than they did when you were winning. You know, when things are good, it's easy to say it's the road. When it gets tough, you know, I always go back. I told people, friends of mine, when I was at Baylor, my toughest year was the second year. We weren't very good. We lost some people. And that role we got on, we came back after beating Kansas State and going to the Holiday Bowl. That was the finest coaching job that I've been around by a group of people. Art did a great job. We stayed the course. We beat some really good teams, and we finished the season beating a really good team. So that's when you just buckle up, you know, and you realize it's not about you. It's about what I do, how I do it, and I'm going to show them what I'm made of. It becomes a pride thing.
I knew that those last two questions were pointed and also something that you would answer. I didn't know how you're going to answer it, but I knew that you would not in any way dodge the bullet. I appreciate your honesty in both of those cases. Paul?
Phil, this week this is one of the best weeks in college football, like just banger game after banger game. Ohio State and Oregon are this week. You've got Texas OU, like Craig already talked about. Which one do you think is the most interesting to you?
To me, is the Ohio State-Oregon game. It's going to be played in Eugene, I believe, and there's a lot of intertwined things there. Of course, Coach Kelly, you know, really, you know, took over for Rich Brooks and really had a role there at Oregon. You know, he's known, and him going back and really, you know, I want to see. I'm a huge Dan Lanning fan, and I want to see if they can play defense and tie that potent offense together against the quality team.
Coach, I wondered, all the coaches that you talked to, how much has the expanded playoff maybe juiced up just the season itself for coaches, knowing that there's that opportunity that has never really been there before outside of 4 and, of course, when it was just 2, but just how much does that add to the mix for coaches to know that there's those availabilities if you handle your business along the way and you know, not a lack of room, so to speak?
Craig, I think that it does. It keeps the season live. You know, you're looking at Alabama lost 4th or 5th week of season. Hey, they're still in it. You know that. I know that. Tennessee's still in it. And you're not one and done. I mean, like us. I mean, we had to fight like hell when West Virginia. We thought, oh hell, we're out of it. But we fought our way back and won the championship again in 2014 and thought we had a chance. But yeah, I think it's so much better, and I think it's the opportunity for more teams. I think it's going to keep it more lively. It's going to keep it more interesting, and I think it's fair. I think that teams. I think you're going to get a truer champion, and that was the purpose of why they're doing it.
We know you have children. All of them are amazing. You've talked about them before throughout your time and career and also life. But we had one of your sons on last week, Ahmad Dixon. He was honored by Midway for the 4x400 mile relay team. They won a state championship when he was there. They had a ceremony. And then, of course, we discussed later in the year, which we've asked you about too, on the Big 12 championship teams being honored in the game against TCU. That young man, he loves you. You love him. And I just, maybe one of these days we'll have you combo like we're going to get you with Phil Snow.
Oh, I would love to. Ahmad, first of all, his heart is bigger than Texas. I mean, very few times did I ever see him not having a smile from ear to ear. I mean, he would walk in, I would walk in, he'd just be smiling. You know, and he was such a joy because I know this now. And some people, I've coached a lot of great players. This guy had the it, you know, dog or whatever. He was a bad man. I mean, he was a football playing fool. And I never felt so hurt for him in any time in my life as when he hit Boykins at TCU.
Mm-hmm.
And let me tell you something. I don't know if you remember it, but it was in the first half. And we weren't playing very good on offense. And we had to put his little brother in, Orion, who played lights out. But Ahmad he was playing lights out. And he had to miss the first half of the Texas game that you know, I think at halftime was a 6-3 game. And when he came back on that field on that cold day in the last game at Floyd Casey Stadium, I'm telling you, I wish I could have taken a picture of our old locker room when our players saw. He came out of the shower, and that number, so he came out, and I mean, our guys, I remember Eddie Lackey. I thought Eddie had knocked him out because he was so glad to see him because he hit it, and it was on.
Yeah,
he ended up 30-10.
Yep, you guys smoked him and won the Big 12 title, closed out the stadium. He brought up the Gary Patterson relationship and gave us background on that. And it was from when he recruited Ahmad. And Ahmad, they just didn't like kind of the tone that Gary brought to the table. And that, of course, obviously then Gary was bitter, and coaches can get that way too. But Ahmad was a bad man.
You know, Gary's and I used to tell Ahmad that. I said, hell, we're old coaches. Don't worry about us. Hell, just, you know, do your thing. And Ahmad, that's one of the things I applaud him. I always did. I mean, when it was game time, except for that one play when he became a cheerleader at OU that Thursday night game. And Morton, KJ saved his butt, stopped the quarterback on fourth down. But what a great kid. I'm looking forward to seeing him on the second.
Okay, who did you wear out the most between Sam Hall, Ahmad Dixon, Mike Hicks, or Orion Stewart?
Well, listen, if you talk to all four of them, they would all be squealing right now. It's me. You know, I will tell you this. When I first came here, I knew I had a job. I mean, and I don't mean this bad, but they hadn't been very good. And it was just, we had a lot of work to do. And I knew it. And Mike Hicks, I identified him immediately. And I said, okay. I said, somebody called him Cholo. And I told him, I said, that fits you. You're Cholo from here on. And I'm telling you, one time I had some looks from him that if he had a gun, he'd have killed me. But I think it got better as it went through because he won the first game. And we played TCU, and they're driving, and we played a buck coverage drive. Hey, beautiful play, and then we lost him for 4 or 5 games, and then when he came back, it was on. He was a phenomenal player, and then of course Orion and I tell the story on this. Brian Norwood and we talked about where to put Ahmad. And in 11, we had Sam at safety, Ahmad at our nickel, because I thought Ahmad could be a better blitzer. And Brian came to me after the season, and it was his idea totally. He said, I think we would be better off with Ahmad and Sam, and it was a great decision. And we had guys. Our nickel was so important. Sam did a good job. It was a better fit. Ahmad did so much. Ahmad did so much better in space than I thought he would, and that's why he became an NFL player. And of course, Orion was an athlete, and Orion had senses that you couldn't. I mean, he just loved to make me mad during practice. I mean, he made it a point, hey, I'm getting him today. And that was about every other day. I would send his ass in and tell him I wasn't going to play him, and then I'd back off. But I would give him some adjectives before I did. And, the other guy the two other guys we had in that nickel that was Colin Brent and what's my guy's name? That left us.
What's
our nickel?
What school? What did he go to?
Trigger.
Yeah.
Blanchard.
Oh yeah. Oh Trayvon Blanchard. Yeah.
Now I'm telling you, all of those guys were impact players. I mean, every one of them. And I always laugh, but I run it. One of this coach I was talking about today, we were talking about yesterday. He said, Phil, we got to talking about our players and how we were playing. He goes, nobody. I remember Matt Brown telling me after the Texas game in I guess it was in 11. It was 11 that he goes. Well, who are these guys? We don't even know some of these guys. We had gotten KJ Morton, Joe. Joe ended
Williams,
up being a heck of a DB for us. And that's why I tell people, and I mean this, if you evaluate and you really look at them and they fit something you do, and then you do what they can do, you can win. And that's one of the things that I think Art Briles and what we did very well there. We took guys, and nobody was thinking Corey Coleman would be as good as what he was. Hell, Corey Coleman could have started anywhere as a running back also.
Yep. Who was his cousin that we had on the show? Was it Kevin Jennings?
Kevin Jennings.
Yeah,
Kevin Jennings from SMU is Corey's cousin.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Had a hell of a game.
Had a huge game against Louisville. What about that?
Yep.
The Mustangs showed up.
Yep. They are feeling awfully good, and they should be. Hey, great memories, great stories. Thanks for your insight on certain teams and what's happening with college football. Our audience loves this segment. We do too, and we love you too, Phil. Thanks for your time.
We appreciate you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Phil Bennett with us on 365 Sports. The transparency of what he on two tough questions about one, he's been fired. So I wanted to get kind of that feedback a little bit too. But unbelievable. Daniel Acton, was Phil Bennett ever offered the Baylor head coaching job during the transition? No. He was offered the interim job while they were trying to figure things out. And he did not want it. He was on board when Jim Grove's name came up, which was also a suggestion from Grant Taft, too.
Yeah, for what many may not remember, the entire staff was allowed to stick around and coach that following season.
Yeah.
So that was part of the whole strange, still relatively unknown details of how that could have happened, given that ESPN and Paul Feinbaum and Outside the Lines would have told you that they were all, the devil incarnate. And yet here they were on staff that entire next year, completely absolved of anything. But that's not how it was portrayed. Nevertheless, a lot of interesting stuff there. This week, probably not the week to ask about TCU, given his close ties there. But if they continue on this trend, we're going to have to ask about them.
Yeah, we will. That next week we'll bring that up no matter what.
If they struggle again. Yeah. But I think the biggest thing that he said there, and I'm not saying this to toot my own horn, but it's just what I have believed this entire time. This does not absolve Dave Aranda. Mm-hmm. But they don't have the players, guys.
No, right.
They don't have the dudes. And it's so obvious, and it's been so obvious. Every time they need a big play, they whiff. The Colorado game, Ashton Hawkins catch the ball.
Yeah.
Make a field goal. Like it's that is not Dave Aranda not having the field goal kicker in the right spot. That is not making the clutch kick. That is a great play call that should have been a touchdown. That is a dropped pass.
Yep.
That is a great play call. It should have been a touchdown. That's an overthrow. And I know that comes with the territory, especially in college, but that doesn't absolve Dave Aranda. Like, you brought in the talent, but that is so much more the issue than the culture or the coach or whatever. And it's so obvious to me and has been for going on a while now, but I know that's also touchy territory to hang the players out to dry. Again, it all goes back to Aranda. If he can't pull that dog out of them, then that's on him. But it's very clear their biggest issue is they don't have dogs. They don't have guys that can go, like, I'm going to go save his job and I'm going to go make a play. Instead, it's I'm going to fumble the ball on a 4th down and short and give this team the ball back and then just let this all snowball.
It's not, like you said, it's not a lack of effort. It's not a lack of know-how. It's not any of those things. If you went through a checklist of everything you needed to do to make this team better, the only thing that you can't measure until the game started is how good are we really when you're playing games. And then once it starts, the roster's the roster. Right?
Colorado was a great game plan.
Yeah. So,
It really was. It really
great
was.
game plan.
Yep.
So everything is in place with the talent, but what is college football all about? It's all about talent acquisition. And that's the thing that has eluded him, and that's the thing that will ultimately, that's the difference in this team versus anybody else. Because Iowa State's not exactly, 2022 Georgia, but guess what? They've got some guys that are like, you need a first down? F it, let's go.
Yep. Yeah, they got a big tight end that's going to catch over everybody, your running back going off Jackson.
All of them.
Yeah, well, all of them, but especially
Higgins and Noel
Higgins and Noel are both great. I mean, they got stars over on the Iowa State roster for sure, but that's the thing to me that has just been so abundantly clear throughout this entire struggle is they just don't have those guys that are going to go up and turn a loss into a win. They've got guys that are going to find a way to turn a win into a loss. And I'm not putting all the blame on them. Again, he recruited those guys. Mm-hmm. He's the one that decided to bring in DeQuan Finn when clearly Sawyer Robertson's the best quarterback on the roster. And we haven't even seen DeQuan Finn practically in a month. And we saw very little of him to begin with because it was against, Tarleton State and who else did he play against?
Air Force? No, he didn't play against
Utah. I mean, that's all we've seen of him. But clearly Sawyer Robertson is playing well enough to win them games. A mistake here or there notwithstanding. They wouldn't even be in games without him. So he can have a mistake here and there. But, they don't have that dude at really any position. And it's really hurting them for sure.
Okay, great stuff from Phil. A lot of you with really good feedback today as it's changed from one topic to the next, or the Big 12 or the best games or who's this and who's that. We appreciate you when you watch us. If you don't mind, hit the like and subscribe button and spread the word. One quick note before we get to Paul's top 5. We're not going to break here, Garrett, if that's okay, because we're running slightly behind. A story that we've been following for a long, long time that picked up tremendous steam and looked like it was going to cross the goal line, and then it got kicked back into the dumpster. Fix it and bring it back to me. Judge Claudia Wilkin, today, the preliminary approval of that landscape shifting House versus NCAA settlement in the U.S. District Court of Northern District of Columbia. It is a huge moment. You heard Phil Bennett allude to it. We have discussed it almost to the point where we put it off on the back burner because we just never knew when it was going to happen. This just happened today. This now means, and there are some deadlines, date deadlines that have to be met, but this now means that schools, conferences, whoever can start to make plans for what they can do when it comes to roster size and also so much more. But I did read a lot of the report. Here's what I saw from it's worth noting that as long as the settlement is approved, some elements such as roster limits, new scholarship limits, and much more can be implemented. Now let's see what happens. There still are a few hurdles, but this was huge news because she has been very angry at the way this initially was presented.
Well, I mean, she gave them specific instructions and they didn't follow it, and that's going to be frustrating for anybody, any judge in a case, especially that's this monumental, that please do this. Now, the other thing, I can understand getting mad with them putting in rules that are going to cap the dollars that students can earn and restrict that access, because if I was the judge and I went to both parties and be like, guys, what is this all about? Isn't this about us capping, you capping this? you can't cap it. You can't do those things. You can't put those arbitrary restrictions on them. You have to find a different way. And it felt like something they were trying to sneak through. And obviously Claudia Wilkin read the whole thing, which is her job. And when they didn't sneak it through, they got it out. Now they're going to have some other challenges along the way, but this is the first step. And without this, I know there are some presidents who are like, screw it, let's go to trial. That would have been very bad for a lot of schools had they done that.
Yeah, I'm not taking a victory lap. I mean, this is still not approved, and they could always go back to the drawing board again because, the judge orders them to. But it's a preliminary agreement, if you will, that's not finalized, that still has some hoops to jump through. So I don't think anybody's really celebrating yet, although it's closer now than it was. How close, I still don't know, because the big term that gets thrown around is antitrust. So you start throwing these caps on, NIL, well, there's a new lawsuit that just is going to interrupt things. So I don't know how this solves those types of things and prevents further lawsuits, but it at least is a groundwork that has been desperately needed to try and find a base for everybody to operate on, or know what you're trying to operate on and decide whether you want to operate on that or not, because obviously schools don't have to take part in this if they don't want to. But, yeah, there's still a lot of questions. I don't think this is the big shoot off the fireworks just yet. I think we still have a ways to go there. But it does seem like progress, so that's good, but there's a lot of, I think, unanswered questions still.
I contacted a couple of those who are legally smarter than me, which means any of you watching or anybody else on this, and we've had some of them on, and all of them said that this was a huge hurdle. It's not the only hurdle, but this thing could have delayed this for months and months to come. But at least now that the two sides know a little bit more about what Judge Wilkin expects, they did it. Now they move on.
It totally feels to me like they tried to sneak it through because they got it done pretty quickly on, no, I said this. But you're knowing that they were probably like, oh, well, we tried.
Yeah, and there are other lawsuits, as Craig brought up, about this and this and this and this.
This could spur new lawsuits because you're going to try to put a cap on something. They're going to be like, So I don't think the lawsuits are done at all. And this is, as the headline on, I think maybe as ESPN says, like, they got the preliminary okay. So that was a step forward from what we heard the last time. But what's the key word there? Preliminary. So, again, not shooting off fireworks, but it does seem like a good step forward. And there's a lot of details to this, guys. Like, there's a lot of, I think Ross Dellinger has like a 10-tweet thread with all of the details of what this means, like for Title IX and for scholarship limits and all sorts of things. So if you want like all the nitty-gritty, go to Ross Dellinger's Twitter feed, and he's got it all laid out there in black and white on the particulars of this. But yeah, let's get this bad boy across the finish line and then see what that looks like on the other side. But the sooner they can get some sort of cohesive groundwork laid, I think the better for the sport, because while it is providing some entertainment value, I think it needs some corralling a little bit. And that's not saying withhold money. That's just saying, like, can we just form like an actual, like, can we function like an actual organization?
This is not just anything that like says, can we look at something? It's not like they're being anti-athlete.
Yeah, no, I'm just cutting that off.
Trying to keep this thing from like. Okay.
Would you go to a restaurant that's run like the NCAA?
No, of course not.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. Yeah. Then that's the thing.
There you go.
If TGI Fridays has a better system than you, then fix it.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Garrett, do we have the picture of the Stanford game against Virginia Tech in the crowd?
Yep, give me 1 second.
This is from Brian Fisher, who covers college football on the left coast. This was their first ACC game. They had a report on the official box score that there was 36,277 people in attendance at a game that Virginia Tech won 31-7.
Well, so that means
they're counting the mosquitoes or something. Yeah.
No, I think it's bigger than that. I think that Stanford, there's a lot of great minds at Stanford. They have perfected invisibility, and you know what? I'm here for it. So congratulations, Stanford, on 36,000 cloaked students. Good on you.
Yeah. Now, as often the case, there were some particulars here. Like I did see a couple of people respond that it was particularly hot, like a more than average. Like it was like the system out there or whatever's like it's not what they're used to. Now I know it here that doesn't make sense to anybody. It's 100,000 degrees. You still show up at the Alabama game or whatever.
That here, though.
But sometimes it does get too hot. So like I'll give some people the benefit of the doubt that there was like this heat element that was pushing you away, but I know that's not going to be a sturdy enough excuse to be that barren. I mean, like that's an empty stadium basically is what that was from that particular camera shot. And there's damn sure not 38,000 people in there unless you are counting the flies and the ants and the roaches throughout the stadium. But yeah, that's certainly not a good look. But you didn't sign up Stanford for their football attendance if you're the ACC. It was for a lot of other reasons. So you kind of knew this was coming with the territory.
All right, we will tomorrow look at the Big 12 schedule and put it in a graphic form for you. We just had so many different things to get to today and tried to weave through all of them, and also the bangers, because there are bangers, which I love in college football coming up this weekend. We aren't done. We have 365 Sports tonight at 10:30 on the CW. Emery Winters working on that. Garrett Ross has been running the mothership. I haven't mentioned Paul and Craig or me, and we have mentioned you and our great sponsors. Paul at his top 5.
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying your critical application to multiple shared public networks, you've probably been feeling the slowdown. And that's no good for business. A private UPN fiber network can get you and your business moving at the speed of light. Whatever you need, we can build it. Internet, Metro Ethernet, Waves, dark fiber. We deliver custom private networks and are focused on business customers only. Our next generation 100% fiber optic infrastructure offers you low latency and ultra scalable bandwidth with speeds up to 100 gigabit to run your critical applications. Your connection won't be limiting your performance anymore. It's diverse and scalable, so it can grow and change as your business grows and changes. And with a secure carrier-grade private network, you'll have all the reliability you need. Contact UPN today to learn more. Fast just got faster.
For Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Welcome back from the weekend, everybody. In a wild college football weekend, it certainly was. This is the Top 5 brought to you by Texas Beef House. Let's get into our Week 6 awards. And, of course, use that promo code 365sports whenever you go to bitonbeef.com and make your purchase for a discount. The What Is Going On With You award goes to UCF. I mean, what's going on there? They should be a lot better. They had a chance to send Billy Napier out the door. Florida jumped on them in the swamp, and UCF crumbled under the pressure of playing one of their biggest in-state rivals. I say in-state rivals. UCF and Florida don't play all that much, but UCF cares about Florida way more than Florida cares about UCF, and that's for sure. As well they should, as you aspire to be as successful a program as Florida. But Florida has not played a clean game all year, except against Stanford, until yet Saturday. So what's going on? Where is the chemistry that I thought was there with this team at the beginning of the year? Maybe they can bounce back and get back in it. And look, that wasn't a conference loss, but a morale loss for sure, and one that probably stings the fans quite a bit. Number 4, the time to work on next season award. Oklahoma State, guess what? It's over for you this year. You're not making the playoff. You're not making the Big 12 championship game. You'll probably make a bowl game, and that's fine, but find out what you've got for next year. There's going to be questions about Ollie Gordon and how much he should play after suffering the injury last week. I hope that doesn't mean he shuts it down. I don't think that's really good for anybody. But if he has a lingering injury, don't be surprised to see that linger maybe 2 weeks longer than it normally would, just because what's the point at this point for Ollie Gordon, who's going to be one of the more highest rated running backs in the draft? They've got problems at quarterback, and those don't look like they're going to get any better, but do you get to a point where you start seeing a youth movement at other positions? That's probably what's got to happen at Oklahoma State, at least a little bit, because as of right now, they're completely out of the conference race, and to get back in it with half the season gone means that you'll have to have tragedy happen to every other team around you. Number 3, the All You Needed Was a Better Coach Award. Yes, I'm making fun of Jimbo Fisher here. In his tenure at A&M, they certainly had some big wins. He beat Alabama once. That was a fun night in College Station. But bottom line was they never put an ass whooping on anybody in the SEC like they did to Missouri on Saturday. Dear God in heaven, that was old school A&M football, where it was balance, it was running the ball, it was fierce, ferocious defense, like little shades, I'm not saying the Wrecking Crew's back, but there was a little Wrecking Crew spice in there a little bit, like just a bit of flavor of the Wrecking Crew. They did not have that in his entire tenure in College Station, and here they blew out a team in Missouri who people thought was a top 10 team, although they were probably the top 10 team that was masquerading as a top 10 team the most since Florida State lost to Georgia Tech. So since that point, there's not been a team that was kind of pretending to be in the top 10 like Mizzou, and Mizzou got shelled in College Station, and a huge win for Mike Elko and the Aggies as they are building some confidence heading on down the line. And then as it stands right now, they're in a tie for the lead for the SEC because they're 3-0 in the league right now. Number 2, the Might Have Saved Your Job Award goes to Sam Pittman. They're tearing down goalposts in Fayetteville the other night. Usually you don't fire a coach the year you tear down goalposts. So Sam Pittman, and look, Arkansas is sitting at 4-2 right now. They're not that bad off. If he gets 2-3 more wins down the stretch, albeit on a really hard schedule, they've got Taylon Green at quarterback. There's some good things going on with the Hogs. There might not be a reason to get rid of Sam Pittman this year. I know that probably distresses some fans who have long sold on Sam Pittman, but the AD, Hunter Yurachek, loves him. So going to be hard to convince him to let him go, especially after the emotions are running high, and high in a good way, at Arkansas after that huge win over Tennessee, a win where they cracked the code on the Tennessee offense and held Nico Amaliava in check, something nobody has done all year. And number 1, wrapping up today, the Are You Effing Kidding Me Award goes to Vanderbilt. I don't need to say any more about this other than El Rincón, Diego Pavia, my guy. I've been talking him up. Everyone here can tell you how much I love Diego Pavia because I gave him the name, El Rincón, the Rascal, and that's exactly what he was. He was Diego football, as I saw put today, because he was very much a fan of Johnny Football growing up. The Commodores got in line behind him and had the biggest win in school history over number 1 ranked Alabama after one of the most exhilarating college games I've ever seen a week ago. Here comes Vanderbilt, of all people, to clip the wings on that and tell you that things don't matter like they used to anymore in college football. The times, they are a-changin'. Vanderbilt, the Are You Effing Kidding Me Award. Congratulations, guys. It's one of the most prestigious awards we give at the top 5. And I know we give a lot of different awards that don't really have the same name week to week. But that's just how it works here at the top 5. There you go. Congratulations, Vandy. We salute you. That's the top 5. Smokey's going to say bye-bye right now.
All right, Paul, thank you for the top 5, brought to you by TexasBeefHouse.com. And again, Friday, Saturday, they have their next live auction. Go to TexasBeefHouse.com or bidonbeef.com. It is always great product. You get to pay what you want to pay, not what's a sticker when you walk in the grocery store. All right, for Garrett Ross, Emery Winter, thanks again, Craig Smoak and Paul Catalina. Those of you in the chat room, those who watch us, and there are a bunch of you on Twitter at 365 Sports YT and even Sikkim 365 app. Just got word, unless something changes tomorrow, Houston football coach Willie Fritz will be one of our early guests tomorrow here on 365 Sports. So Kyle Visser, you'll be thrilled with that news. I believe that's you. Thank you, everyone. I'm David Smoak. Have a great night.